Chapter 1548. It's just an ordinary spiritual vein. How can it be regarded as the secret of the sea? This question made Yang Chun smile bitterly again. However, it was his wife who didn't understand the situation twice in a row, so Yang Chun explained in detail. There must be a spirit vein of heaven immortal level in the sea. This is clear to all the sect. Yang Chun knew that the two women had only been in the spiritual world for a short time, and many things were not very clear. So he explained patiently, it's just that there are almost none near the coast. If it's far away in the sea, this kind of spiritual vein is occupied by powerful sea beasts. If you want to compete for it, you need to pay a great price. Just like in the mortal world, everyone knows that there must be a powerful spiritual vein in the sea, but except for the Green Jade Immortal Island and the South China Sea Alliance, which have a series of islands as a foothold, other sects rarely open a spiritual vein in the sea. Even the powerful sect like the Zhao family only absorbs spiritual power from Longxian instead of directly occupying the spiritual vein on the seabed. The reason is the same. A powerful spiritual vein will inevitably attract powerful sea beasts. If you want to snatch it first, you have to pay a considerable price. The gain is not worth the loss, unless you have a super powerful magic weapon like the Dragon Clan Sea Map that can directly absorb spiritual power. Otherwise, no one is willing to take the risk. This is the case in the mortal world, and the same is true in the spiritual world. So everyone understands that there must be a spirit vein of heaven immortal level in the sea, but no sect will be willing to occupy it. Now that Yang Chun discovered this immortal spirit vein, it was an extremely rare offshore spirit vein. First, this spiritual vein is relatively hidden and no one has discovered it so far. Second, it is close to the coast, and powerful sea beasts generally will not appear in this distance, so it was convenient for Yang Chun. Of course, Yang Chun knew about this spiritual vein because of the memory of his previous life. In his memory, this spirit vein was discovered 3,000 years later. At that time, the cultivators had already retreated to the Sunset Rock, the overlooking Sun River, and the resentful parting sea. The spirit veins on the ground were simply not enough for everyone to cultivate. Under the search of thousands of heaven immortal masters, this offshore spiritual vein was discovered, but it took thousands of heaven immortal masters for a full 30 years. With this memory, Yang Chun naturally didn't need to waste any more time. He could just find it directly. The reason why they had to go around in circles was also because of what Yang Chun had said before. There was no point of reference on the surface of the sea. They had to go to the bottom of the sea to find the natural maze and then walk over it step by step. What is the secret of the hatred parting sea? Everyone's interest was immediately aroused. Gong Sunling also forgot the little embarrassment from before and asked curiously, "Let's go now. It's not far from here." Yang Chun did not disappoint them. He stood up and prepared to move. Because Longxian had to cover up the spirit vein, he was left behind. In a place like this, with the support of the Merit and Virtue Monument and the insanely rich spirit vein, Longxian could cultivate the Dragon Clan's cultivation techniques recorded in the second level of the Dragon Tower in a short period of time. For cultivators, the higher the grade of the spirit vein, the better it was for their cultivation. The most suitable one was the best. Directly using a spirit vein that exceeded one's own level would not bring any additional benefits other than wasting spiritual power. Everyone understood this logic. Therefore, no one dared to be entangled here and followed Yang Chun to see the true secret of the hatred parting sea. This time around, everyone entered Yang Chun's flying shuttle and flew toward a certain direction. After a while, everyone felt the flying shuttle come to a stop. "We're here." Everyone was a little surprised. Even though Yang Chun said that it wasn't far from here, everyone felt that it was at least 1,000 miles away. It had only been a cup of tea's time, and they had actually arrived. Appearing at the bottom of the sea once more, everyone used their spiritual senses to explore the surroundings. It was still empty, and there seemed to be nothing at all. They did not know what the secret Yang Chun was talking about was. But since it was a secret, everyone wanted to find it out on their own. At least, it would be more interesting that way. "Don't tell us first." We'll look for it ourselves. When they were underwater, Ho Yun, who had the water attribute, seemed to have returned home as he began to jump up and down in search. These days after his ascension, he had been stifled to death. Even after killing those people from Chiman's sect, he hadn't been able to fully vent his frustrations. It just so happened that there was a game to pass the time. He couldn't let Yang Chun reveal the mystery at once. Of course, Yang Chun was well-behaved and did not intend to reveal it. After taking everyone to the place, he looked at it with a smile. Everyone put on an adventurous posture, looking for it bit by bit, like children playing hide-and-seek. It was rare for a human immortal cultivator to have this kind of childlike innocence. Yang Chun naturally would not spoil the fun. This sea area seemed to be very calm. There were no winds and waves, and the bottom of the sea was flat. There were various kinds of seabed creatures, but they were not enough to threaten everyone. Feeling the murderous aura emanating from Ho Yun, they had already escaped far away. Only Yang Chun and a few others were here. No matter how everyone explored with their spiritual senses, they couldn't find any secrets here. In impatience, Ho Yun held his big stick and imitated the previous actions of Black Tortoise. He plunged the stick into the deep bottom of the sea, as if he wanted to find something from the ground. Others also followed suit and began to have the idea of exploring the bottom of the sea. Shi Kuei and Xiesha were both of the earth attribute. They directly went underground, searched slowly, and had a lot of fun. Even Gao Yu showed a rare, lively look, digging around and looking around. Yang Chen's spiritual senses had never left Gao Yu's side. When she was in the mortal world, Gao Yu could be said to be an extremely respected supreme elder. How could she show such an expression? Only when she arrived in the spiritual world, she was no longer a high and mighty great elder, but a newcomer who had just ascended. The change in identity made Gao Yu have such a relaxed expression, such a rare, calm, and serene expression. Yang Chun was going to be crazy. Husband, look! While he was obsessed, Gong Suanling's whisper suddenly came to Yang Chen's ear. In fact, Gao Yu's heart had always been on Yang Chen. When she was playing, she suddenly heard the voice of Gong Sunling. She immediately rushed over and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Did you find a secret?" Gong Sunling shook her head directly. She was the only one who did not play treasure hunting games except Yang Chun. The reason for this was that there had been some small changes in the Mountain River geographical map. As early as in the mortal world, Gong Suanling's Mountain River geographical map had already absorbed the East Sea nautical map in the Dragon Palace, and later absorbed the fragmented South Sea nautical map. They were all magic weapons refined by the Dragon Clan. After integrating the two nautical maps, the Mountain River geographical map was particularly sensitive to the geography of the water system. In the spiritual world, the Mountain River geographical map had been constantly adding the geography of the spiritual world, but when it returned to the hatred-parting sea, it quickly simulated the marine geography. Chapter 1549. Gong Sunling didn't find anything unusual before and just thought that it was a normal situation in the Mountain River geographical map. However, she suddenly found that there seemed to be something more in the Mountain River geographical map. With Gong Suanling's movement, Yang Chun and Gao Yu quickly changed places and appeared in the Mountain River geographical map, and Gong Sunling also appeared beside the two. In front of the three of them was a huge square. It was not particularly appropriate to say that it was a square. It was clearly a huge stone slab. On the stone slab, there was a clear outline, and within that outline, there was a very dazzling bright spot. Around the bright spot, there were a few dim but equally flickering spots. This huge stone slab felt familiar to Yang Chun at first glance, and the outline that appeared was also a little familiar. After thinking about it carefully, he suddenly reacted and pointed to the stone slab and asked in surprise, "This is the stone slab of the East China Sea map? There's also the South China Sea map. It has been fused together." Gong Sunling replied quickly. Both sea maps were produced by the Dragon Clan. The same material, the same technique, and the same function. It was very normal to be able to fuse them together. But what is this place? Gao Yu pointed to the clear outline and asked with a frown. She had also seen the sea maps of the mortal world, and she also knew what the East China Sea and South China Sea looked like, but this place was very strange, and she had never seen it before. This is the sea map of the hatred-parting sea. Yang Chun took over the conversation and said the answer. He pointed to the brightest spot and continued, "That bright spot is the spiritual vein that Long Xian is now covering." With Yang Chen's confirmation, Gong Sunling finally confirmed that this was the sea map of the hatred-parting sea. When it first appeared, Gong Sunling couldn't believe it and thought that something had changed, but now she was completely relieved. After all, the magic weapon of the Dragon Clan was extraordinary. The sea map of the mortal world could still show the distribution of the sea in the spiritual world. Yang Chan walked to the side of the bright spot that symbolized the spiritual vein and reached out to touch it. Immediately, he felt a majestic spiritual energy gushing out. It was the feeling of a heaven immortal level spiritual vein. This sea map still retained the powerful effects of the mortal world. Just this alone was enough to make Yang Chun smile. In this way, as long as Gong Sunling ran around the surrounding ocean, there would be no need to struggle with those powerful sea beasts for the spiritual veins. She could directly absorb spiritual power from a sea map. "Hubby, didn't you say that the hatred-parting sea definitely has a sky, immortal spirit vein? How come I only see one here?" Gong Sunling's questions followed. Those dim spots were definitely ordinary human immortal grade, or even weaker spirit veins. There is no sign of other heaven immortal grade spirit veins. The sea map has just been formed and needs to be perfected. Yang Chun guessed with a smile. As long as we have enough time, or if we run to enough places, we will be able to make up for it. A Ling, this time, we are in an invincible position. With this killer weapon, Yang Chen's family and Chunyang Palace could almost be said to have no worries. Just wait for more and more masters to ascend, and Chunyang Palace would be more and more prosperous. At this point, Yang Chun had already made arrangements. After the ascension of the palace master in the mortal world, Yang Chun restrained other disciples of Chunyang Palace who had already reached the edge of ascension and postponed their ascension for hundreds of years. The reason was that Chunyang Palace had no foundation in the spiritual world. Even if they ascended, they might be suppressed in vain. Yang Chun had told those masters in the mortal world that they would wait for 100 years after Yang Chun ascended. On the one hand, these masters guarded the Chunyang Palace in the mortal world. On the other hand, by the time they ascended, Yang Chun must have taken root in the spiritual world and arranged everything so that they would not be suppressed. It could be said that now Chunyang Palace had territory and spiritual veins. They were just waiting for the population to flourish, and the day of their rise was just around the corner. Knowing that the change in the sea map was a good thing, the three of them were no longer worried and once again returned to the bottom of the sea. Ho Yun and the Old Tree Demon were still searching. The Old Tree Demon was particularly exaggerated. He directly plunged his roots into the bottom of the sea and directly spread hundreds of miles. The movement of the underground could not be hidden from him. However, under such a big move, the four demon race masters did not find anything unusual here, let alone find any secrets. However, everyone was not discouraged and still played in full swing. Yang Chun had been sitting in the undersea pavilion prepared by Gong Sunling for several days. With the mountain river geographical map, it was easy to make such an undisturbed pavilion on the bottom of the sea. Sitting in the pavilion, Yang Chun ate dishes, drank wine, and watched everyone play games. His life was so comfortable that it was a mess. Unfortunately, a secret was a secret. Even with the addition of Gong Sunling, a master who had the mountain river geographical map and could almost cheat, everyone did not find out what the secret Yang Chun said was. More than a month later, Ho Yun was the first to lose patience. He stepped into the pavilion very unhappily, grabbed the wine pot on the table, and poured it into his mouth. After drinking, he sat down and began to mutter, "It's boring. It's really boring." For more than a month, everyone had almost dug 3 feet into the ground, but they found nothing. Everyone's divine awareness could probably sweep all over the place, but they did not find any clues. If they didn't know that Yang Chun would definitely not deceive everyone on this, everyone would have suspected that there was nothing worth paying attention to here at all. With Ho Yun taking the lead, everyone began to return one by one. Everyone returned without success, and the expression on their faces was a little lost. The secret that has been kept for thousands of years, if it can be easily discovered by you, what kind of secret is it? Yang Chun couldn't help laughing. If that's the case, it would have been discovered and taken away long ago. How can it be our turn? It was very reasonable, but everyone was a little annoyed that they couldn't find it. It was not that they really had any heart demons. When the last old tree demon also put away his roots and came to the pavilion to drink, Gao Yu pushed Yang Chun gently. It's time for you to solve the mystery. Yang Chun stood up with a smile and walked out slowly. Everyone's eyes and spiritual awareness all closely followed Yang Chen's figure, and from time to time, they frantically explored around him, hoping to find something at the last moment. After walking for about 100 steps, Yang Chun finally stopped. After everyone's divine awareness explored him frantically again, they still found nothing and could only give up. This little secret of Lihen's Sea is actually here. Yang Chun bent down and picked up a small conch at his feet with 3 fingers and put it in the palm of his hand. Chapter 1550. A conch, not even half a finger, did not need 3 fingers. Even 2 fingers could be picked up. In the sea, such a conch was not known. How many who would care about a small and insignificant conch? There was a faint fluctuation of spiritual power on the conch, which was very weak. This was not surprising. The creatures of the spiritual world, from the beginning of birth, had the power of the foundation stage, and it was the most normal thing to have spiritual power fluctuations on their bodies. If there were no such fluctuations, everyone would feel strange. In the exploration of everyone's spiritual awareness, this kind of creature with low spiritual power fluctuations was not considered at all. Most of the marine creatures fled far away after feeling Ho Yun's momentum. But there were some exceptions, like this conch, which did not have a particularly fast speed and could not escape far at all. They could only shrink their whole body in the shell to avoid it. At the bottom of the sea-parting hatred, there were hundreds of millions of conches like this. Who would pay attention to this kind of dust-like thing? Who could have thought that there would be a secret hidden in this thing that everyone could not find? What is inside? Everyone was shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. As Yang Chun said, it could be easily found by everyone. It would definitely not be a secret that could be kept until the present. Everyone was a cultivator and knew the magic of the word fate. No one cared if they could not find it. However, everyone was curious about what was inside that could be treated as a secret by Yang Chun so seriously. I don't know for the time being. Yang Chun smiled and gave everyone such an answer. Just when everyone couldn't help but smile bitterly again, Yang Chun suddenly told everyone, "Old Ho, old Gay, after you go in, you have to be more careful." It was obvious that Yang Chun knew how to mobilize everyone's enthusiasm. With just one sentence, Ho Yun and Old Gui were excited. Shi Kuei and Xie Sha were also ready to fight and were ready to fight. Seeing that everyone was ready, Yang Chun gave everyone a gesture, and then everyone's eyes were dazzled, and they all disappeared in place and appeared in a strange place. This was a huge space. Looking at it, one could not see the end at a glance. The initial estimate was no less than tens of thousands of miles. Although the ground was very wide, the shape of the sky was very strange. It was a very familiar spiral. Combined with the conch in Yang Chen's hand, there was no doubt that the sky was in the shape of a conch. The most amazing thing was that the space was completely a world of water. Even though it looked no different from the land, it was because the water that filled the entire space was abnormally clear and transparent. In the end, this was just an underwater palace. Everyone was at the entrance of the huge underwater mansion. What entered their eyes was a tall, decorated archway that pierced through the clouds. The words on the decorated archway had been soaked in water for who knew how many years, and had long been dilapidated. Some unfamiliar aquatic vines grew all over it, and it could no longer be seen clearly. While everyone was still sizing him up, Ho Yun's figure suddenly flashed, and he appeared hundreds of feet away. He raised the golden rod in his hand high and smashed it in front of him. Boom! A huge sound wave traveled from the water to everyone's ears. It was much more powerful than the sound wave on land. The empty space in front of Ho Yun was directly smashed out a huge pit by this rod. It's just that, apart from this, there was nothing else. Everyone's divine senses detected the shadow that flashed by, but Ho Yun's attack was in vain, and he did not even touch the other party's hair. The other party's figure was too fast. Even Ho Yun did not catch up. This time, everyone suddenly became serious. Sure enough, it was a fight worth looking forward to. Ho Yun's face showed the kind of excited grin, making people unable to help but feel creepy. The old tree demon rushed forward for over 100 miles, then quickly took root. In an instant, the ground within a radius of several hundred miles was covered by the old tree demon's roots. The huge canopy of the tree also quickly spread out for hundreds of miles, protecting everyone under the tree. Among the monster race, when it came to physical strength, no one could match Ho Yun, but when it came to the strength of the spiritual awareness, even Ho Yun was inferior in front of the old tree demon. Soon, the old tree demon noticed the location of the other party's real body and began to attack frantically. The other party didn't seem to want to confront the old tree demon, Ho Yun, head-on. As soon as he started, he quickly left. In the water, the other party's speed was amazing, a few points faster than Yangchen's shuttle. Shikue also showed his real body. Although it was an earth attribute viper, it was equally flexible in the water. With a twist of his body, he appeared dozens of miles away, waiting for the opportunity to capture the figure of the other party. Xiaosha was a sand scorpion. He had no advantage in the water and could only maintain a general speed. At the moment, he did not try to be brave. Together with Yang Chun, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling, he slowly walked towards the real body of the old tree demon. For the monster race, the most effective way of cultivation was to fight. At the beginning, Chunyang Palace was weak, and they could only suppress their nature. Now, with Yang Chun, they didn't have to care so much at all, just fight with all their strength. With such an opportunity, how could they easily let it go? By the way, don't kill him directly. Yang Chen's voice came from the water to the ears of Ho Yun and the old tree demon, Shike. If you want to control this underwater mansion, you can't do it without him. What a disappointment. Ho Yun couldn't help but complain. He couldn't help but be happy. If he didn't kill the opponent, how could he enjoy it? Wait until you can catch up with him before talking about other things. Yang Chen laughed and ignored Ho Yun's discomfort. He made a space beside the trunk of the old tree demon and once again asked Gong Sunling to make the pavilion. The husband and wife, plus Xie Sha, sat in the pavilion and continued to rest and drink. The old tree demon's spiritual awareness clearly captured the figure of the opponent several times, but when he and Ho Yun wanted to fight, the opponent always escaped quickly, making Ho Yun and Shikue always yell in anger. Cowardly rat, if you have the guts, fight with Uncle Ho. Ho Yun finally couldn't help it. He used his full cultivation base and shouted into the space. The loud voice quickly spread throughout the underwater mansion, but the opponent didn't seem to hear it at all and ignored it. He still approached carefully from a distance and left immediately when he found something wrong. Even if the old tree demon Ho Yun and Shikue tried their best, there was no way to make the opponent stop. This situation lasted for almost 4 or 5 days. Ho Yun and Shikue had been provoked and filled with anger. Only the old tree demon was still unusually calm and still keenly captured the opponent's figure. Finally, the opponent seemed to be familiar with their clamor and began to try to fight against Ho Yun and the old tree demon. Chapter 1551. Compared to the beginning when he ran away before he even touched him, the opponent has now improved a lot. Of course, this was the feeling of Ho Yun and Shikue. The other party also seemed to understand that the old tree demon's spiritual awareness was powerful and did not dare to contact the old tree demon. So far, except for Yang Chun, no one has been able to understand what the opponent was. Even Gao Yu Gong Sunling, whose spiritual awareness had reached the 6th grade of human immortal, was the same. The other party's speed was too fast, and everyone's spiritual awareness in the water could not keep up with the other party's figure. Perhaps after taking a few attacks from Shikue, he found that he didn't seem to be able to cause much damage to himself. So the other party had more contact with Ho Yun and Shikue. Ho Yun was keenly aware of this. It must be said that in terms of fighting, Ho Yun had an unusual intuition. After discovering this, Ho Yun began to hide his strength moderately, lowering his cultivation level to the same level as Shikue, and also began to fight with the hidden monster. The sound of fighting rang out one after another, and the battle seemed to have begun to become a stalemate. When it was discovered that Ho Yun and Shikue really couldn't bring him any more damage, the other party's courage grew, and he got closer and closer. Unlike the beginning, when he found something wrong, he fled immediately. The old tree demon and Ho Yun had been working together for many years, quietly watching Ho Yun and Shikue slowly lead the unknown opponent to the center of his canopy. When the time was right, Ho Yun and the old tree demon both shot in an instant, revealing their fangs that had been tolerated until now. Boom, boom, boom. 3 attacks accurately hit the opponent's body. This time, because the 3 guys had planned for a long time, they hit from 3 directions at the same time. The other party couldn't even run away and could only fall into the encirclement of the 3 guys. The other party finally revealed his figure. After seeing it, everyone took a breath of cold air. The opponent, who had always been slippery and fast, turned out to be a very small killer whale. The length was less than 3 feet, and the fat body didn't show the fierceness of the killer whale at all, but it was very cute. This place was really a bit mystical. The huge underwater mansion was hidden in a tiny conch that couldn't be any smaller, and inside the underwater mansion, there was a killer whale whose original body should have been very huge, but now it was very small. The world was really big. Nothing was too strange. They thought that the joint attack of the 3 of them would make the little killer whale dizzy and then surrender, but what they didn't expect was that the little killer whale's body just shook a little, and then everyone saw the fat on its body tremble a few times, and then nothing happened. The 3 people's confident attacks fell on the little killer whale's body, but it only made its fat tremble a few times. This was simply a disgrace. Ho Yun knew that although he had held back, even an earthly immortal expert would have to temporarily avoid that blow. But in the face of such a little killer whale, it actually took his blow as if nothing had happened. How could this extraordinary shame and humiliation be possible? Don't even think about leaving. Take another strike from me. Ho Yun was furious and shouted at the little killer whale. The muscles of his whole body bulged to the limit. He raised the golden giant stick high, and then smashed it heavily at the head of the little killer whale. As for what Yang Chun said just now about sparing his life, he had already forgotten about it. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, an accident occurred. The little killer whale's body suddenly enlarged, and in an instant, it became hundreds of meters long. Before Ho Yun's cudgel smashed down, its huge tail heavily whipped Ho Yun. Bang! Ho Yun, together with his stick, flew out like a cannonball and was directly whipped 100 miles away by the tail. The sudden change made the old tree demon, Shikue, stunned in place. Such a situation of being whipped away had always happened to Ho Yun's opponents, but this time it was completely reversed, and it was Ho Yun who was whipped away. How was this possible? The old tree demon, Shikue, and Xiexia were very clear about Ho Yun's strength. Even if the 3 of them combined their strength, they were not his opponent. All the monster race in the entire Chunyang Palace seemed to be able to fight Ho Yun together. What was the cultivation of this killer whale? How could it be so terrifying? Another question also floated in everyone's mind. Since the killer whale's cultivation was so powerful, how could it escape before it was touched? Ho Yun's roar followed his body all the way to this side. This time, Ho Yun was really furious. When did the mighty Ape King suffer such a big loss? He, who was known for his strength, was whipped away. This could be tolerated. What could not be tolerated? Ho Yun was still in place, but he had already shown his true appearance. The huge mighty Ape King rushed over here with his teeth bared. The ferocity of his face could be imagined without looking. In the face of Ho Yun's ferocity, the killer whale was stunned at first. Then his face changed, and he showed his teeth to Ho Yun in the distance. More than 20 long conical teeth were like huge sharp blades. coupled with the various ferocious expressions on the huge killer whale's face, it was really frightening. Even Ho Yun, who rushed all the way, could not help but change his face. However, who was Ho Yun? The fiercer the opponent, the more he liked it. The killer whale showed such a posture. Ho Yun was not angry, but happy. He shouted again, "It doesn't count. If you have the guts, you can eat my stick." With Ho Yun's cry, the huge mighty ape king had jumped high in the water, and the golden giant stick instantly became longer and larger, smashing fiercely towards the head of the killer whale. The killer whale seemed to have thoroughly figured out the details of the three people in the attack just now. At this moment, he did not dodge and faced Ho Yun's giant stick head-on. Bang! The giant stick hit the killer whale's head firmly this time. However, the killer whale that Ho Yun expected to be hit by a stick did not appear. Instead, his hand was soft. He felt that the giant stick seemed to have hit a pile of cotton and began to sink softly. On the chubby body of the killer whale, there was a trace of being pressed down. The giant stick was in the middle of that trace and was quickly covered by the fat on both sides and could no longer be seen. The stick that Ho Yun smashed down with all his strength was exhausted little by little in this soft fat, and finally completely lost its strength. Then the pile of fat began to slowly recover to its original state, and Ho Yun's giant stick was gently bounced away from his body. Is this also possible? Not only Ho Yun, even the old tree demon Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, even Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, did not expect such a situation. The full strength of the mighty ape king in the realm of river-turning strength was easily taken by a pile of fat. Chapter 1552. In the eyes of the killer whale, there was not much surprise. Looking at the stunned crowd, especially Ho Yun, he slowly shook his head. That kind of disdainful eyes made Ho Yun almost die of shame and indignation. The most powerful master of the Chunyang Palace. When was he ever looked at with such eyes? It has always been him who looked down on all living beings. When has he ever been looked down upon like this? When Ho Yun was only in the Deshang stage, he met the great master Chu Yulong. At first, the great masters also had such eyes, but later, all of them turned into panic and shock, which shocked a large number of people. Ho Yun, who is unstoppable in the world, was ridiculed by a fat killer whale in this unknown and mysterious underwater mansion. Moreover, it was an undisguised contempt. If this news were spread, it was unknown how the guys who died under Ho Yun's big stick would feel or how happy they would be. Of course, the dead guy had no chance to express his emotions, but Ho Yun, who was alive, still couldn't accept such a shame and humiliation. With a loud cry, the golden stick was raised again and slammed down on the face of the killer whale who stayed in place. The banging sound kept ringing, but the sound was not the sound of a straightforward head-on collision, but with a soft, low taste. On the body of the killer whale, hundreds of dents appeared in a moment. These marks suddenly took shape, and then slowly returned to normal. After a while, the round and chubby killer whale was completely restored. Ho Yun finally gave up and stood in the same place. The golden giant stick, which had never left his hand, was also let go by Ho Yun at this moment and fell to the ground. The original high-spirited master Ho Yun, at the moment, was completely disheartened. His face was expressionless, as if he had lost all his vitality. Although everyone could not see the sweat on Ho Yun's face in the water, everyone could imagine his mood. If an expert specialty, which he was most proud of, was broken by someone standing still, no matter who it was, they would be equally disappointed. Neither the old tree demon nor Shi Kuei had any plans to do it again. Even Ho Yun had such a result. Even if the two of them went up, they might not have much of an effect. Needless to say, Shi Kuei's cultivation was far worse than the old tree demon. Although the difference was not much, the old tree demon had one thing that Ho Yun could not compare with. He was many times more cautious than Ho Yun, and at the same time, he was also many times calmer than Ho Yun. He could see the facts clearly and judge the strength of his opponent and himself. The killer whale looked chubby and did not have any lethality. For the time being, no one could tell the killer whale's cultivation level. However, Old Tree Demon could conclude that the killer whale's cultivation level was definitely beyond the human immortal stage. It was at least a level 7 or 8 stage Earth Immortal, or even higher. Perhaps it was even at the peak of level 10 stage Earth Immortal. The gap between the Earth Immortal and the human Immortal was far from comparable to the gap between the Dashang stage and the human Immortal. To be honest, Ho Yun's defeat was not undeserved. No one on Yang Chen's side made a move. Killer Whale didn't know why, but he didn't make a move either. He just stared with his round eyes and looked around. Old Ho, it's not shameful to be defeated by a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert. Yang Chen's voice finally rang out. It was as if he had been enlightened and entered Ho Yun's ears. Level 8 stage Heaven Immortal? Hearing Yang Chen's words, everyone present was shocked. This unassuming, chubby, and a little comical fellow was actually a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert? Ho Yun's eyes, which were almost unfocused, suddenly flashed with a bright light the moment he heard Yang Chen's voice. Level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert? If it was really an opponent of this level, then it was really not shameful to be defeated by him. Although Ho Yun usually had a condescending attitude, this fellow was still very respectful to the truly powerful experts. For example, Yang Chun had forcibly suppressed him in terms of strength. Ho Yun had never dared to bare his teeth in front of Yang Chun. Now, this killer whale turned out to be a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert. There was a difference of 2 major realms. No wonder his big stick and great strength had no effect at all. As soon as he realized that his failure was a matter of course, Ho Yun immediately regained his vigor. With a hook of his toes, the big stick that he had just let go of was picked up in his left hand. He then stretched out his right hand and gave Killer Whale a big thumbs up, a level Heaven Immortal expert. No wonder everyone could not really see Killer Whale's strength. It turned out that he had already exceeded the limit of everyone's perception. Old Tree Demon and Shi Kuei had the urge to collapse at the thought that they had actually attacked a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert. Fortunately, Killer Whale was behaving very strangely at the moment. He stayed where he was and did not move at all. Seeing Ho Yun give him a thumbs up, he also returned to his original size of 3 feet. He widened his big round eyes and looked at Ho Yun curiously. Senior, this junior has a suitable cultivation method for you. Senior can refer to it. Since Yang Chun had already spoken, he naturally had already taken care of everything. At this moment, was there a more suitable way of communication than the beast controlling secret art? The direct communication of divine sense made Killer Whale startled, and then his body turned to Yang Chen's side. Feeling that Yang Chun had no malice, he nodded, and a voice sounded in Yang Chen's mind. What cultivation method? Transformation secret art. Yang Chun passed the answer along with the transformation secret art. It can allow Senior to change his body shape. Before everyone could react, the communication between Yang Chun and Killer Whale had been completed. In the blink of an eye, the 3-foot-long Killer Whale turned into a round, fat man, standing in place. A level Immortal expert was indeed a level Immortal expert. Back then, Shi Kuei and Xiesha cultivated for at least a year. Even the Old Tree Demon took more than a month to master the transformation secret art. Killer Whale had mastered it in just a moment. Interesting. Killer Whale looked down at the changes in his body, raised his hands and feet, and played very happily. At the same time, he also spoke. After adapting for a while, he looked up at Yang Chun and asked, "Who are you? Where did you come from? What are you doing?" "This junior is Yang Chun of Chunyang Palace. These 2 are my wife, and these are the elders of this junior's sect." After Yang Chun cupped his hands and saluted, he began to introduce himself and everyone. This junior and others found the underwater mansion outside, so we came in to find out what was going on and happened to meet Senior. "Please forgive us for our rudeness, Senior." "You came from outside?" Fat Killer Whale looked very curious. He stared at the crowd and then pointed to Ho Yun and said, "Your strength is not small. Unfortunately, I still can't beat you." Ho Yun curled his lips. Even if he was already convinced in his heart, he did not call him Senior. Chapter 1553. Hey, in terms of strength, I'm not your opponent. The fat killer whale shook his head and gave Ho Yun a thumbs up. "You're not bad." Ho Yun's eyes flashed again, and he asked with joy, "You can't beat me in terms of strength?" Although he knew that the fat killer whale was a sky immortal master and it was normal to lose, Ho Yun was still quite happy to hear the fat killer whale admit that he was not as strong as him. "But your body is not as strong as mine." The fat killer whale admitted Ho Yun's question with his eyes. Then he stuck out his belly and said proudly. Everyone saw a pile of fat cushioning the power of Ho Yun's big stick and then slowly bouncing back. Not only Ho Yun, everyone else also nodded. This was a fact. The fat on his body was definitely the killer whale senior's. "Since senior is so powerful, why didn't you fight at the beginning and ran?" Ho Yun was puzzled and asked curiously. This question was also what everyone else wanted to know. Everyone had the same doubts. At this moment, Ho Yun asked the question on behalf of everyone. Everyone stared at the fat killer whale, waiting for him to return. "I've never fought with others. I was afraid of being beaten by you, so I ran when I saw you." The killer whale senior was like a child who had never seen the outside world and grew up in a closed environment. He said very honestly, "You are the first batch I've seen." So that was the case. Everyone understood. This terrifying fatty had been living in this underwater mansion and had never fought with others, so naturally he didn't know how to judge the opponent's realm. It was funny to think about it. A level 8 sky immortal master was scared by a few human immortal level kids and ran away. Who knew how many people would say that it was nonsense? All the unreasonable things before had an explanation. Because this guy was a level 8 sky immortal, especially a water race, he was very fast in the water. It was normal that people couldn't see his shadow. After taking a few attacks from Ho Yun and the others, he came out to fight. Finally, he stood still and took Ho Yun's full attack. This was also because he had a comprehensive understanding of his and his opponent's strength. Of course, his mind was simple. He didn't think about what kind of psychological trauma Ho Yun would have if he took Ho Yun's attack like this. The pitiful Ho Yun had been inexplicably dealt a blow and had only just recovered from it. The old tree demon and Shi Kuei were glad that they had acted late. Otherwise, they would have followed in Ho Yun's footsteps. "I've never been out. Do you think I'm powerful outside?" The fat killer whale still looked like a curious baby and asked very seriously. This question made everyone speechless for a while. Killer whales' nerves must be big to a certain extent. Otherwise, how could he not notice Ho Yun's depressed expression just now? If an 8th-stage heaven immortal was not considered powerful, then what was considered powerful in the spiritual realm? Do I really have to mobilize the grand supreme mystic immortal experts of each sect? Very powerful. Yang Chun did not have such a reaction. He just gave Killer Whale a simple affirmative answer. Killer Whale immediately became complacent. As soon as he heard that he was also very powerful outside, he felt very happy. Her innocent look made everyone blush with shame. However, up until now, everyone was actually sweating profusely in their hearts. Although Killer Whale was smiling and talking to everyone now, this kind of simple-minded person was even more difficult to deal with. If he was annoyed, no one would be able to leave alive with so many people present. Because of this, almost no one spoke, and only Yang Chun came out to deal with it. It seemed that Yang Chun had a well-thought-out plan, and it was estimated that he already had a way to deal with it. What's fun outside? After Killer Whale Fatty was proud, he immediately began to ask again. There's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of delicious food. Yang Chun replied quickly. It seemed to be a casual sentence, but it immediately attracted the attention of Killer Whale Fatty. Delicious food? What kind of delicious food? A lot, something like this. Yang Chun, of course, answered the question with a purpose. Seeing that Fatty really took the bait, he immediately took advantage of the situation and threw out the corpse of a human immortal level demon beast hundreds of meters long from the merit ring. This human immortal level demon beast corpse was actually the corpse of a kind of beast on the demon continent. At that time, the corpses of the beasts hunted by Gao Yu and the other women were handed over to Yang Chun. After the demonic chi on the corpse was completely purified by Yang Chun, it became like this. As soon as the corpse was thrown out, Fatty Whale stared at it and observed it carefully. Obviously, he had never seen this kind of beast before. After circling the corpse a few times, his figure suddenly changed, returning to the original appearance of killer whale again. But his figure was a little bigger. It looked like it was thousands of meters long. Facing the corpse of the demon beast, he opened his mouth, and the corpse hundreds of meters long was swallowed by him. After a crunching sound of chewing, killer whale turned into a fat man again, smacking his mouth as if he was savoring the aftertaste. After a while, he said, "The taste is a bit special, but it's not delicious. It's just a little supplement." Everyone looked at it for a while. Although Shi Kuei and Xie Sha had devoured the corpses of other demon beasts, they had never seen a whale like killer whale. Everyone didn't understand what Yang Chun was doing with this posture. Was it to make killer whale addicted to it? "I haven't added any seasoning, and I haven't cooked it. Of course, it's not delicious." Yang Chun looked speechless and replied helplessly, "If you want to eat real delicious food, you can't be impatient. Wait slowly." It seems that delicious food is the hobby of killer whale. Listening to Yang Chun, he said to wait slowly. He immediately turned into a good baby. "Okay, I'll wait. You go get something delicious. Come on, sit over there." Yang Chun reached out his hand and led killer whale to the pavilion. The tables and chairs inside were ready-made, and the wine and dishes were also ready-made, just to let killer whale feel it. "What is this?" Looking at the exquisite dishes, killer whale asked curiously. As he asked, his nose twitched. He had already smelled the appetizer. Without waiting for Yang Chun to answer, the little fat hand had grabbed a plate and poured it into his mouth. This time, this plate of dishes that everyone thought were not enough to fill the gap between killer whale's teeth was chewed hundreds of times in killer whale's mouth before fat killer whale reluctantly swallowed it. His eyes had already looked at the other empty plates. The dishes that Gong Sunling carefully prepared for Yang Chen's meal finally played a jaw-dropping role, turning a master of grade 8 heavenly immortal realm directly into a salivating bug. Chapter 1554. If his physical strength was not as good as Yang Chen's, killer whale would not be moved. But to his horror, even if he used his whole body's spiritual power, he could not lift Yang Chen's arm, which looked several times thinner than Ho Yun's. Gong Sunling and Gao Yu came up and took away all the half-eaten dishes on the table. It was absolutely rude to entertain guests with cold leftovers. Yang Chun would not make such a mistake. Although letting Gao Yu and Gong Sunling do it seems to be a little contempt for the two women, it will not really lose their face to entertain a master of the 8th grade of Heavenly Immortal. As soon as the Jade Dragon wine entered his mouth, killer whale was directly conquered by this unique mellow taste. It was the first time in his life that he had tasted such a taste. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as if his whole body was soaked in warm water. It was mixed with a wonderful feeling as if he was deep in the clouds, which was unforgettable. After Yang Chun poured everyone a cup of specially prepared Jade Dragon wine, killer whale became interested again and smelled the unique fragrance. This time, instead of swallowing it in one gulp, he asked excitedly, "What is this? It tastes so strange and fragrant." "Good stuff." After taking a sip, fat killer whale praised it and then followed Ho Yun's example and poured the rest of the wine into his mouth. Plates of delicacies were served by Gao Yu in turn. Fat killer whale had the heart to pick it up and swallow it in one gulp. But looking at the appearance of Yang Chun and Ho Yun, he restrained his impulse and clumsily imitated Yang Chun, holding 2 chopsticks made of unknown precious metal, and learned to pick up food. Now killer whale thinks about it. What he has eaten before is simply a pile of garbage. Where has there been such delicious food? Yang Chun is right. Good things need seasoning and good cooking. Fat killer whale has now begun to think about how to keep Gong Sunling by his side and make such delicious food for himself at any time. After a few dishes, killer whale's fat tongue was almost bitten off by himself. The only regret was that the amount of food on the plate was too small. It became empty after only a few bites. It was really disappointing. Fortunately, the dishes were still being served, so there was still enough to eat. Gong Sunling's hands and feet were very fast, and the delicacies were soon ready. Gong Sunling had always considered Yang Chen's appetite, so she always carried a large amount of well-preserved ingredients with her. At this time, in order to completely subdue the fat killer whale, she used all her skills. Anyway, her husband was going to eat, so Gong Sumling of course used the best skills. Killer Whale has seen the old tree demon's slow drinking, and he has also seen Ho Yun's direct pouring into his throat. After secretly comparing it in his heart, he felt that the old tree demon's appearance was more enjoyable. After thinking for a while, he imitated the old tree demon and took a sip. Then he closed his eyes to feel it. This was a completely different kind of feeling. A line of fire went from his mouth to his stomach and then spread to his whole body. In just a moment, his whole body seemed to be ignited, and the feeling of excitement made people want to sing loudly. This is the Jade Dragon wine, carefully brewed by another wife of this younger generation junior. Senior, please taste it. Yang Chun reached out and asked Killer Whale to pick up the glass. The others looked at Yang Chun and secretly pinched a sweat. Daring to anger an 8th grade Heaven Immortal Master, it was estimated that among the people present, only Ho Yun dared to do so without knowing the inside story. If he really knew that the other party had the strength of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm, Ho Yun would not be a fool. When Killer Whale's little fat hand reached the second plate, Yang Chen's hand also arrived at the same time and gently pressed his palm. Why? Killer Whale's brain was simple. He immediately showed an angry look on his face and looked at Yang Chun fiercely. Ho Yun, the old tree demon, Shi Kuei, and Xie Sha also sat down in a circle under Yang Chen's gesture, and the 6 of them formed a table. However, the 4 demons seemed to be a little reserved, which was very different from the usual stinginess they used to have. Of course, this was not surprising. The pressure brought by an expert of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm was not a little bit. Beginners would always show some funny scenes, but none of the people present laughed. A Heaven Immortal realm expert was indeed a Heaven Immortal realm expert. His control of his body was absolutely extraordinary. Finally, after losing the 3rd pair of chopsticks, he learned to use these 2 special weapons. This question from the mouth of an expert of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm made people speechless. However, looking at this guy's barbaric appearance of swallowing the corpse of a species beast, it seemed that he had never used cutlery before. It was normal that he did not know the concept. Yes, these are the cutlery. Yang Chun let go of his hand and motioned for Killer Whale to sit down. Then, he gave Gong Sunling a look. So easy? No way. Seeing the fat Killer Whale turn into a drunkard, the old tree demon could not believe his eyes. I don't know why. Yang Chun shook his head and said to Killer Whale with a smile, "You need to use cutlery to eat. You can't use your hands to eat. It seems very uncultured." Seeing the delicious food that he had never eaten before being taken away in front of him, fat Killer Whale's eyes stared straight at the plates. He was extremely resentful, as if he was going to get up and snatch the food back in the next moment. Tasting delicacies after having good wine felt different. Fat Killer Whale only felt that all the delicacies that he could taste in his life had been fulfilled with this meal, and there were no more regrets. It was said to be gentle because in everyone's eyes, Yang Chen's movements were very gentle and did not seem to be using any force at all. But to Fat Killer Whale, it was as if a mountain was pressing down on his arm. No matter how hard he tried, he could not lift his arm. There's no hurry. My wife's cooking skills are not bad. Just in time for Senior to taste it. Yang Chun found it funny, but his face was still very formal. This explanation finally made Fatty, who was anxiously waiting, retract his gaze from the plates. Killer Whale's face cleared up a little, and he pointed to the bowls, chopsticks, cups, and so on the table suspiciously and asked, "What is tableware? Is it those things?" Fat Killer Whale was a simple man. Coupled with Ho Yun's frequent persuasion to drink, he also let go of his throat. The 2 of them drank 1 glass after another, then they drank 1 bowl after another, and finally, they drank 1 jar after another. After drinking a few jars in a row, both of them turned into a pool of mud and drilled under the table. Ho Yun lost to Killer Whale, who had a huge gap in cultivation, and he was no longer so disappointed. Now, seeing that Killer Whale was a little addicted to drinking, He also let go of his arrogance and competed with killer whale in drinking. He can't fight, can't he drink? Chapter 1555. A master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal was put down just like that, without the slightest resistance in front of everyone. No matter how you think about it, it was incredible. If they had known this earlier, they wouldn't have fought at the beginning. They could have come up to drink, and they wouldn't have been so embarrassed at the beginning. How could it be so easy? Yang Chun breathed a sigh of relief and then sighed. This is just the beginning. There will be trouble later. Fatty Killer Whale seemed to have a simple character, but if he really thought that he could be bought with such a little food and wine, then he would think that the master of the Heaven Immortal was too simple. This underwater mansion still needed Fatty Killer Whale's help to control it, so he couldn't be touched at this time, so he could only be subdued. But how could it be so easy to subdue a monster? Not to mention Shi Kuei, Xie Sha, old tree demon Ho Yun, who didn't spend a lot of effort by Yang Chun and promised countless benefits before they succeeded. Especially Ho Yun, when he joined Chunyang Palace. His cultivation was higher than everyone else's. If it weren't for Yang Chen's benefit of the yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique, and his own strength that could firmly suppress Ho Yun, how could this guy be so obedient now? The same was true for Fatty Killer Whale in front of him. His simple mind meant that he wouldn't have so many twists and turns, which was a good thing. But once there was something he was dissatisfied with, he would definitely vent his anger immediately. The anger of a master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal, not to mention the current Chunyang Palace. Even those first-class sect in the spiritual world couldn't say that they could easily take it. It was the first time for Fatty to drink, and he was a little drunk. Ho Yin had long been used to it, and it didn't take long for him to wake up. The first thing Ho Yin did after waking up was to find Yang Chun to settle accounts. Yang Chun, did you already know the result? So you deliberately made fun of me? Ho Yin stood in front of Yang Chun and almost grabbed Yang Chen's collar and scolded him. Fortunately, this guy knew that he was no match for Yang Chun in terms of strength, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. However, Ho Yin's questioning of Yang Chun was also what the old tree demon wanted to ask. At the beginning, Yang Chun also asked everyone not to hurt the fat killer whale, which was simply a blatant misdirection. If not for that, they wouldn't have been so arrogant, and Ho Yin wouldn't have been beaten so miserably. Old Ho, don't you think that after destroying the Equal Gate sect, you're looking down on everyone in the world? In the face of Ho Yun's furious questioning, Yang Chun didn't show the slightest bit of anger. In fact, not only Ho Yun, but the old tree demon Gue Shanyu was also included. When they attacked the Equal Gate sect, none of the human immortal stage Equal Gate sect disciples were a match for the two of them. This made them very proud. They always felt that in the human celestial stage, they were invincible. Of course, a freak like Yang Chun was an exception. His wives and concubines were also freaks, and they couldn't be judged by common sense. This kind of arrogant attitude was also a great taboo in cultivation. Confidence was a good thing, but blind confidence was another matter. There were not many disciples in Chunyang Palace, and these people had a very close relationship with Yang Chun, so Yang Chun naturally had to think more about them. Listening to Yang Chen's words, Ho Yin also fell in a deep thought, and the old tree demon, Shi Kuei, and Xie Sha next to him were the same. The Equal Gate sect, which had a 6th grade Earth Immortal Master, was destroyed by a dozen people in Chunyang Palace, and all of them were killed. When many people mentioned Chunyang Palace, they no longer had the kind of contempt in the past, which made Ho Yun feel a lot better. Now, thinking about it carefully, as Yang Chun said, they were a little complacent. The blow of the fat killer whale came at the right time, so that they could completely wake up to their position in the spiritual world. Ho Yin didn't have much reaction here, but there was another kind of temperament change in the old tree demon over there. Along with the change was the spiritual power fluctuation of the old tree demon. It seemed that in such a short time, the old tree demon's cultivation had improved a lot. The 4th grade human celestial, Yang Chun, was shocked. The old tree demon was indeed the old tree demon. After experiencing the change of his mentality, his temperament became more and more stable, and even his cultivation improved by a small realm. stimulated by the change of the old tree demon. Ho-Yin seemed to fall into a state of confusion. Standing in the same place, the expression on his face became arrogant, and the next moment, it became very calm. It was simply two extremes, and even the spiritual power fluctuation on his body seemed to be a little chaotic. Bang! In the midst of everyone's surprise, Yang Chun punched Ho-Yun's face, and Ho-Yun's whole body flew out. What are you thinking about? You are you. It is your nature to be presumptuous. Why do you want me calm? Following Yang Chen's fist, there were Yang Chen's words. I'm teaching you a lesson to let you know the immensity of heaven and earth, not to let you change your nature for nothing. Cultivation is about following the will of heaven, not blindly suppressing one's nature. If you cultivate in this way, you will lose the meaning of cultivation. Ho-Yin can cultivate to this realm. He has already understood this truth, but for a while, he was stimulated by the killer whale, and Yang Chen's punch just woke him up. Ha, I understand. Ho-Yin, who had been sent flying, quickly returned to his side. He was still in the air, and he was already laughing wildly. Listening to the presumptuousness and freedom in his laughter, Yang Chun believed that he really understood. Ho-Yin really understood. So in front of Yang Chun, in front of everyone, his huge body began to slowly become thin. Just like Yang Chen's body expanded and then shrank by half, Ho-Yin also began to experience this process. Not long after, Ho-Yin changed from a burly man to a well-proportioned, tall, and handsome man. The muscles on his body have shrunk a lot, but Ho-Yin himself knows that his yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique has been promoted to a small realm, and there's been a qualitative change in pure strength. Shi Kuei and Xie Sha did not have such a good opportunity and could not break through on the spot, but they also understood Yang Chen's painstaking efforts, and their state of mind naturally changed. This time, it seems to be a happy situation for everyone. They found a spiritual vein of the fairy Immortal level, and they also found a large underwater palace. The four monster race masters have all improved. So far, they have temporarily gained the friendship of a grade 8 fairy Immortal master. Everything seems to be perfect. However, Yang Chun has begun to worry about what method he should use to make the fat killer whale fully recognize himself in Chunyang Palace. At present, the fat man has a pivotal role for the current Chunyang Palace. In any case, this matter must be solved perfectly. Chapter 1556. At any time, if he wanted to subdue someone, it was nothing more than a few words of kindness and power. Now the fat man was obviously obsessed with food and wine, which was easy to satisfy. But how to make the fat killer whale convinced and not lose his temper in the future, he needed to have the same ability to subdue him. Fight? Although Yang Chun asked himself how tough he was, he had never been so arrogant when facing an 8th grade Heaven Immortal expert as a 4th grade Human Immortal Junior. Even with the Golden Bell, the Great Yin and Yang 5 Elements Flying Sword, the 3 Purities Secret Art, the Great Yin and Yang 5 Elements Secret Art, and the Yellow Turban Strongman Body Refining Technique, he was not his opponent. At first, the fat killer whale just didn't know his own combat effectiveness and couldn't clearly judge the combat effectiveness of others. Once he went crazy and really wanted to use his killer move, the people present would not survive for more than a few rounds. This was by no means an alarmist. A master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal had such strength. Perhaps on land, this guy was huge, and even if he had a high cultivation, he might not be able to catch up with the speed of everyone's escape. But the reality now was that everyone was in the underwater palace. Competing with a killer whale in the water was simply courting death. However, when he saw the fat man fighting with Ho-Yun, he was still interested in his strength. Yang Chun thought that maybe he could compete with the fat man in this aspect. In the memory of his previous life, this guy seemed to be tempted by delicious food, and then became a super thug guard of a demon sect, and was given a powerful and safe underwater palace. In this life, since Yang Chun had already taken the sea of hatred, he naturally could not leave this superb item to others. The difference was that the demon sect in his previous life had a master of the Heaven Immortal level who could suppress this guy. Now Chunyang Palace was just a few kittens. not to mention a master of the Heaven Immortal level. Even an opponent with a slightly higher level of the Earth Immortal level would not dare to say that they could fight against them. But it was not Yang Chen's style to give up the Fat Man and the Underwater Palace. If it didn't work, he could only use the power of the Blood River and the Immortal Beheading Stage to completely suppress the Fat Man. However, in this way, the Fat Man was a bit forced to surrender. He was not necessarily loyal to Chunyang Palace. Moreover, if Yang Chen were to use the power of the Blood River and the Immortal Slaying Platform, the commotion would not be ordinary. When he was in the mortal world, Yang Chen once thought that he had completely absorbed the killing intent of the Immortal Beheading Platform. It was only when he refined the entrance of the Immortal Beheading Platform that he realized that he was still far from it. He hadn't even reached 1% of it. At that time, he was really a little arrogant. Using the River of Blood alone might not be enough to subdue an 8th-tier Heaven Immortal expert, and it would only increase their hatred. Coupled with the power of the entrance to the Immortal Slaying Platform, there was no telling if it would be damaged. That was not all. Once the aura of the Immortal Slaying Platform erupted, the spiritual realm would definitely descend into chaos, and they would search for a peerless demon like him. At that point, a tiny underwater mansion and an 8th-tier Heaven Immortal fatty would be a loss that outweighed the gains. Just when others thought that Yang Chen had a well-thought-out plan and Yang Chen was racking his brains, the Fat Man finally woke up from his drunken state. As soon as he woke up, he yelled at Ho Yun, "What method did you use? How dare you give me a headache?" The headache after a hangover, and this guy thought that Ho Yun had done something. After Yang Chen stepped forward to explain, this guy tasted a little more wine under Ho Yun's instigation. The feeling of headache disappeared, but there was a unique aftertaste. That feeling made the Fat Man like it very much. I haven't asked for the senior's name yet. When the Fat Man was completely sober and sat down at the table and began to wait for the wine and dishes to be served, Yang Chen asked politely. The fat killer whale had already realized the beauty of the Jade Dragon wine. Whether it was a light drink or a lofty drink, each had its own flavor. Now he had completely become a captive of the wine, and he didn't want to extricate himself from it. When he woke up, he had to continue, and everyone had to bite the bullet to accompany him. "I don't have a name. What do you call me?" The fat killer whale shook his head directly. He lived alone and never thought about the name. Listening to Yang Chen's question, he realized that there was a good name, and he remembered to ask everyone's identity. Yang Chen has already introduced himself, and others have also been introduced, but only as a senior of the sect. Now that everyone is a drinking friend, it is necessary to reintroduce them. Ho Yun, the Old Tree Demon, Shi Kuei, and Xiesha said their names in turn. The names of Shi Kuei and Xiesha made the Fat Man very interested. After he figured out that the two guys were just lazy and used the names of Viper and Sand Scorpion, he immediately made the same name for himself. "Then I will be called Jinghu." Yang Chen has already expected this. Sometimes this guy's mind is simple. Jinghu is Jinghu. Anyway, it's just a name. People who practice don't care so much about it. After stuffing himself with food, this time, Jinghu and Fatty Jing didn't get drunk again. After a hangover, he had experience and knew how to use spiritual power to dispel the alcohol at the appropriate time. Because of this, he was able to enjoy Gong Suanling's food fully sober. This time, he almost swallowed his tongue again. It's delicious. After eating, Fatty Jing was not vague at all. He gave a thumbs up to Gong Sunling, which he learned from Ho Yun at the beginning. However, after the praise, Fatty Jing immediately showed his true colors and said to Gong Sunling unceremoniously, "You will follow me in the future and cook delicious food for me every day." No, Gong Sunling did not answer, but Yang Chen answered. "What a joke. Let Gong Sunling follow this guy to be a cook, dream on." Why not? In the eyes of Fatty Jing, since he was the best and he liked to eat delicious food, it was a matter of course to bring someone to cook for him. Why not? "Aling is my wife." Yang Chen still shook his head and replied very seriously, "I cook now because I treat you as a guest. I can't follow you." Fatty Jing felt that what Yang Chen said made sense, but he didn't want to go back to his previous life. After eating Gong Sunling's food and drinking the Jade Dragon wine, he had lived a dog's life before, and he was even worse than a dog. He was a little reluctant to let Jing Hu give up. "This is easy, let's fight." Ho Yun, who was next to him, wanted the world to be in chaos. He said in a provocative manner, "Whoever wins will listen to him." "Good idea, let's do that." Fatty Jing suddenly felt like a confidant. He immediately nodded and said to Yang Chun, "Let's fight. Whoever wins will take it. How about it?" Chapter 1557. Nothing much. Yang Chun glared at Ho Yun fiercely, knowing that this guy was still dissatisfied with Yang Chen's scheme before and wanted a little revenge. However, how could Yang Chen agree to this kind of thing? He shook his head directly. "Then what do you say?" Fatty Jing felt that after eating his food and drinking his wine, it seemed a bit unreasonable to bully others with his own strength, so he could only ask resentfully, "Well, let's compete in strength." Yang Chun finally found the time to say his plan. "Ho Yun didn't do anything good, but this topic was just right. If I win, you will join our Chunyang Palace. Naturally, there will be people who will serve you well. If you win, I will let a Ling entertain you once a year. How about it?" "That's fine too." Fatty Jing's thoughts were simple. After listening to Yang Chen's suggestion, he nodded immediately, but then immediately added, "But I may not be better than you in terms of strength. I couldn't snatch the plate from you last time. Why don't you learn from old Ho and see if you can move me? If you can move me, then you win. If you can't move me, then you lose." Although Fatty Jing's brain was simple, he was not stupid at all. When he was suppressed by Yang Chen for the plate, he realized that Yang Chen's strength was amazing. However, he only felt that Yang Chen must be about the same as Ho Yun because the two of them were about the same size now. Since Ho Yun couldn't move him, Yang Chen certainly couldn't either. This suggestion was exactly what Yang Chen wanted. Ho Yun was just a yellow-turbaned strongman with an arcane power of overturning river. Not long ago, he reached the advanced stage because of Yang Chen's guidance, while Yang Chen had already reached the peak of overturning sea strength when he ascended. He was only one step away from reaching the realm of earth strength. Compared to Ho Yun, he was a whole realm higher, so it was not impossible for him to move Jing Hu. There were many yellow-turbaned strongmen in the immortal world who had only reached the realm of overturning sea strength and could already compete with golden immortal masters with brute force. Even if Yang Chun had not experienced the baptism of heaven's retribution, and the strength of his body was not comparable to that of Xian Immortal and Golden Immortal Masters, he was not bad in terms of pure strength. In fact, it might even surpass them. Yang Chun and Jing, who stood facing each other in the vast space of the underwater mansion. Jing, who still maintained the form of a fatty, not returning to his original appearance. Perhaps in his heart, as long as he could withstand Yang Chen's strength, no matter how strong Yang Chun was, in a situation where his realm was inferior to Ho Yun's, he could at most have the strength of Ho Yun's attack, right? Because it was purely a contest of strength. Yang Chun did not intend to use the great Yin Yang 5 Elements flying sword. Even Ho Yun's offer to lend him the goldenrod was rejected by Yang Chun. A good opponent was hard to come by, and an 8th-tier Heaven Immortal target was even harder to come by. Yang Chun was still thinking of fighting with his bare fists. Pung. Under Jing Hu's signal, Yang Chun walked up and unceremoniously punched Jing Hu's plump belly. This was the part of Jing Hu's body with the most fat, and it was also the part where he was least afraid of brute force attacks. The sound was as deep as when Ho Yun attacked Jing Hu. The moment his fist touched Jing Hu's fat, Yang Chun truly felt the elasticity of Jing Hu's body. This method of swallowing almost all power and then slowly reducing the force through deformation could be said to be Jing Hu's most unique method of dealing with brute force attacks. Jing Hu originally thought that Yang Chen's fist would softly sink in like Ho Yun's rod, and then be bounced off, leaving him unharmed. However, the power carried by Yang Chen's fist gave Jing Hu a big fright. Similarly sinking into the pit of fat, similarly having the force reduced by the fat deformation. But the strength of Yang Chen's fist was so great that even though the fat had deformed to its limit, it still could not completely reduce the force. There was still a part of the force that directly penetrated the fat and heavily bombarded Jing Hu's internal organs. Standing in the same place, Jing Hu made a slightly surprised, muffled sound, and his powerful spiritual power quickly offset the force that went straight into his internal organs. Even so, the place where he was hit by Yang Chen's fist still had some faint pain. Although it was not enough to injure him, the feeling of the fist hitting him was not good. Ho Yun's eyes widened on the side, for fear of missing a little. Yang Chen's body refining technique realm was higher than his. Ho Yun was clear. This was not a good time to see what the higher realm of body refining technique looked like. Your punch is more than 10 times heavier than old Ho's. Those who had received the attacks of the two exclaimed and were most qualified to judge the strength of the two. Yang Chen's punch made Jing Hu very surprised. Looking at Yang Chen's figure, his cultivation base was also slightly low, but the strength of this punch almost made him lose his composure. Fortunately, Jing Hu, who endured the pain, could still stand in the same place and was not sent flying by the punch. Otherwise, he would have lost in the first punch. Yang Chen's first punch was just a test, and the next was the real attack. Facing Jing Hu, Yang Chen's fist seemed to turn into a large canopy, carrying hundreds of fist shadows, and slammed into Jing Hu's fat. At this moment, Jing Hu was not as relaxed as he was at the beginning. His face was serious, and his spiritual power flowed all over his body, completely protecting his whole body. Just after this step, Yang Chen's fist had already reached his body. A series of banging sounds were endless, and countless pits appeared on Jing Hu's body. Each pit was the result of Yang Chen's fist attack. Just because Yang Chen's attack speed was too fast, the first pit had not had time to bounce, and the second pit had already appeared. Such a shocking scene appeared one after another. Jing Hu's body was almost stretched to the extreme, and all the spiritual power in his body was resisting the power that rushed straight into his internal organs, bombarding from all directions. He had always been proud of his almost invulnerable fat, but at this moment there was a burst of pain. It was completely the feeling of being forcibly blasted out by Yang Chen. However, an expert of the 8th grade of the Sky Immortal Realm was an expert of the 8th grade of the Sky Immortal Realm. Even if he did not use a magic treasure to protect himself, he only relied on his body and spiritual power to defend himself, and he was able to withstand the series of bombardment from Yang Chen. However, even with Jing Hu's cultivation base, he could no longer maintain a human body at this moment. He completely restored his original appearance of a killer whale, and his body had also expanded a lot, becoming several feet in circumference, no longer just 3 feet. Yang Chen also secretly complained in his heart. Jing Hu, this fatty, really lived up to his reputation. His fat body could even withstand the power of the peak of the sea pouring strength. Although he had not been baptized by the heavenly tribulation, power would not lie. Every one of his attacks was firmly received by Jing Hu. Could it be that his strength was really helpless against this fatty? Chapter 1558. Fatty Jing's current state was completely in line with the characteristics of using softness to overcome hardness. A body of soft fat, wrapped in extremely tough skin, was simply a natural shield. It was more useful than any protective magic weapon to deal with this kind of strong attack. On the contrary, many seemingly advanced protective magic weapons would be shattered by Yang Chen's punch when fighting hard. It was because he only knew how to make himself into a hard shell, but he forgot to add a buffer. Without a buffer, no matter how strong it was, there would always be a stronger attack that could break it. Obviously, this was already a deep application of strength. Yang Chen suddenly realized after hundreds of attacks, if he insisted on using the strongest strength and did not understand the balance of hardness and softness, he would eventually become a bigger frog at the bottom of a well like those guys who had their magic weapons crushed by him before. Ho Yin did not understand this principle, so his life-bound magic weapon was an incomparably hard big stick. Similarly, Yang Chen himself only realized what he was missing now. Even if his realm was higher than Ho Yun, it did not seem to be much better. Since hardness couldn't break through Fatty Jing's fat, then he had to change his method. Yang Chen recalled his experience as a great principled golden immortal and tried hard to recall the fighting methods of those super powerful guys. While fighting, he pondered how he should deal with the situation in front of him. Lifting something heavy as if it were light was another level of realm, higher than Ho Yun's current realm. Yang Chun could already reach it, but he was still helpless in the face of Fatty Jing's fat. How to make Fatty Jing's fat not work? In the process of waving his fists, Yang Chun could not completely attack Fatty Jing's body with his strength. Now that everyone was in the underwater mansion, no matter how he punched, there would always be a part of his strength consumed in breaking through the water. To put it bluntly, this water was basically the same nature as Fatty Jing's fat, but it was not as strong as Fatty Jing's fat. Water. Yang Chen's mind keenly grasped this concept. Why was strength always consumed quickly in the water? Why would the ball always bounce when hit into the water? If the ball was pressed into the water, it would not bounce so quickly. The reason why the fat would bounce back was because the fat would always bounce back after being pressed to the limit. But what if it was just a slow press? As soon as he thought of this, Yang Chen's mind lit up. His fist that was swinging towards Fatty Jing was no longer as fast as before. It began to slow down. Yang Chen's actions puzzled everyone. Why did he suddenly move in slow motion when he was about to attack? Fatty Jing didn't seem to care at all. He didn't even care about that kind of fast attack. So why would he care about a slow fist? He watched as the fist touched his own body and slowly sank into his own fat until it was pressed to the limit. Only at this point did Fatty Jing understand something, but it was too late to react at this time. At this time, Yang Chun suddenly exerted his strength. The power of the Peak River overturning strength passed through the fat that had been compressed to the extreme and directly acted on the inside of Fatty Jing's body. There was no sound, but Fatty Jing seemed to be hit by a huge hammer, and his whole body flew up. No matter how he stabilized it with his spiritual power, it was useless. After walking through the water for dozens of feet, under the effect of his own cultivation base and the surrounding water, he offset Yang Chen's huge force and hovered in the water. How is this possible? What couldn't be done with a quick punch was actually pushed so far by such a simple and slow movement. Everyone who saw this scene had an expression as if they had seen a ghost. Then, everyone immediately began to think about what happened. Again, Yang Chen had just touched the edge. How could he stop now? He had already forgotten the bet just now and immediately shouted for Fatty Jing to continue. Where could he find an 8th grade Sky Immortal sparring partner? Fatty Jing also had a look of disbelief. If his body hadn't already flown out, he wouldn't have believed that he would be sent flying by Yang Chen's slow punch. When Yang Chen called out, Fatty Jing was also unconvinced and immediately returned to his original form. He finally knew how to restrain himself and turned into a giant killer whale that was hundreds of feet long. The previous blow was obviously an accident. If he hadn't turned into a human form, causing his fat to be too thin, he wouldn't have suffered that loss. This time, no matter how long Yang Chen's fist was, plus Yang Chen's arm, his body couldn't be thicker than Jing Hu's fat. Yang Chen couldn't compress Jing Hu's fat to the limit, even if he stood on his tiptoes. Jing Hu wanted to see if Yang Chen still had a way to break through his current state. Yang Chen realized a lot of things from the punch just now, the core of which was the application of soft force. At this moment, facing Jing Hu's body, he was not afraid. His fist turned into a palm and slowly slapped on Jing Hu's skin. It was completely different from Yang Chen's previous firm and fierce force. A soft force that seemed to be able to penetrate all obstacles penetrated Jing Hu's thick layer of fat and once again acted on his body. The firm and fierce force could bring a moment of pain to Jing Hu, but would pass after enduring for a while. It wasn't a big deal. However, this soft force was very uncomfortable. The pain wasn't as intense as before, but the duration was nearly twice as long. It was very uncomfortable. It was just 1 or 2 hits, but Yang Chen was completely unable to use this force skillfully. It just so happened that there was a live target in front of him that wouldn't be injured at all. How could Yang Chen be polite? His hands seemed to have turned into butterflies, fluttering in all directions and slapping on Jing Hu's body. Anyway, Jing Hu's body was so huge, so he wasn't afraid of the wrong position. He just had to slap it. Every slap made Yang Chen have a new kind of understanding which made him so addicted. More importantly, this kind of slightly slow and gentle attack saved a lot of energy compared to the kind of firm and fierce attack. No wonder people said that the firm could not last long. The opposite of the firm could not last long was the soft could not defend. Yang Chun didn't know how many times he had heard these words in the mortal world, but he had never had such an understanding. Even in his previous life, in his 10,000 years of memory, even when he reached the level of almighty immortal, he always felt that absolute power could occupy the absolute upper hand. He never thought that there would be such a soft attack method. It was no wonder that he was stuck in the almighty immortal realm for 10,000 years, and his cultivation was forcibly raised by others. Not to mention anything else, just his comprehension of power was not up to standard. So how could he become a true expert? Now, under the pressure of this fatty, he really began to realize this kind of power. Chapter 1559. Some of the things that he had ignored before, at this moment, seemed to have flooded into his mind. Softness, vibration, abrupt force, all kinds of methods were used by Yang Chen's hands. Regardless of what part of Jing who was in front of him, he just slapped it to the face. The trembling of Jing whose fat was no longer as regular as it was at the beginning. Jing whose chubby round face also seemed to have a trace of pain. It was only because he was competing with Yang Chun that he stayed in place and was not sent flying by Yang Chun. Yang Chun also consciously reduced his power. If the power of the peak of overturning the sea strength really bombarded a few times, let alone a celestial immortal, even a profound immortal or golden immortal would not necessarily be able to completely bear it. This kind of opportunity to practice was rare, and Yang Chun did not want Jing Hu to be interrupted because of pain. The more he hit, the smoother his hands became, and the more skilled he became in the application of various kinds of power. On Yang Chen's face, the smile also grew wider. The strange thing was the speed of Yang Chen's attacks slowly became faster and faster, and after a while, he returned to the original storm-like attack frequency. But although the speed was fast, the way of the attack was completely different. After thousands of palms, Yang Chun did not care what kind of hand gesture he used, fist or palm. Anyway, as long as the angle was suitable, it was comfortable. Jing Hu's feeling was completely different. Although he was still unscathed under this kind of attack, every time Yang Chun hit him, it always brought him a little bit of pain. Under the continuous attacks, Jing Hu's fat face almost drooped to the ground. The more Yang Chun hit, the more excited he became, and the power in his hands finally began to slowly increase. Unknowingly, Yang Chun had begun to fix a certain area to attack. Poor Jing, who had to bear the pain brought by Yang Chen's abnormal power and abnormal skills, and almost wanted to give up. Everyone just looked at Yang Chen's constant attacks, but no one noticed that the body of the killer whale, which was 100 feet in size, was slowly retreating with Yang Chen's blows. Perhaps it was because everyone was in the water and Jing Hu's posture was still the same, so he didn't realize that his body was retreating. But now the body of the killer whale has retreated no less than 100 feet, and it is still slowly retreating. The uncomfortable feeling in Jing Hu's body finally turned into pain. If this continued, if Yang Chun increased his strength, Jing Hu would most likely be injured. Stop! Fatty Jing Hu took the initiative to shout for them to stop. Then, his body quickly retreated for a while before transforming back into Fatty's appearance. After standing still, Fatty Jing realized that the place where Yang Chun was standing was already hundreds of feet forward. You win. There was one good thing about Fatty Jing's simple-mindedness, and that was that he would never go back on his word. If he won, then he won. If he lost, then he lost. He had already been repelled by Yang Chen's tens of thousands of attacks, so he had lost the previous agreement. It's a pity that I can't let Gong Sunling cook for me all the time, but it's not bad to have someone else cook for me. Yang Chun was immersed in a new way of using power, and he was so excited that he could hardly control himself. Hearing the voice of Fatty Jing, Yang Chun stopped subconsciously. But the excitement in his mind was not over yet. He also felt that this was a rare opportunity. He took out a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill and threw it into his mouth. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground on the spot and began to comprehend quietly. What's that delicious? Watching Yang Chun eat a pill with 5 dragon patterns, Fatty Jing immediately became curious and asked, afraid that Fatty Jing would not be obedient at this time and disturb Yang Chun. Gao Yu took the initiative to take out a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill and then respectfully handed it to Jing Hu and explained, it's this 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill. After taking it, it can help you think and concentrate, which is good for cultivation. When Gao Yu spoke, Jing Hu had already thrown the questioning inner heart pill into his mouth, and soon the effect began to take effect. Jing Hu turned around a few times in the same place, shaking his head frantically, as if he didn't know what to do. After a while, Jing Hu's eyes lit up, and he once again turned into a 3-foot-long killer whale. He quickly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, and no one knew where he went. Perhaps Jing Hu was not used to Yang Chen's direct cross-legged retreat, but everyone has their own way, and it can't be forced. Jing Hu also used his own way to digest the effect of the 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill. Yang Chun was in retreat, and the others did not leave, waiting not far from Yang Chun. The old tree demon and Ho Yun have both improved, and they just took the opportunity to comprehend. Shi Kuei, Xie Sha, and Gao Yugong Sunling were left to protect the 3. This sat for a few months. Yang Chun didn't know how many scenes had passed through in his mind. Finally, after thoroughly comprehending what he had gained this time, he opened his eyes. As soon as he woke up, Yang Chun realized that his body had changed slightly. The yellow-turbaned strongman body refining technique, which had been trapped in the peak C strength realm, finally had a breakthrough. He really got rid of the shackles of the C strength realm and entered the realm that countless Xian Immortal and Golden Immortal yellow-turbaned strongman dreamed of. Ha 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 ha! Yang Chun laughed and stood up. He didn't wait for Gao Yugong Sunling, who had been waiting anxiously, to speak and directly made a wait gesture. The 2 women looked at Yang Chun in amazement and didn't know what he was going to do. Ho Yun and the old tree demon had already come out, and together with Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, they also looked at Yang Chun in confusion and watched his movements. Under the gaze of everyone, Yang Chen's arm turned over and shook outward. An irresistible, invisible wave surged out of thin air from Yang Chen's arm and spread throughout the underwater mansion in a moment. Boom! All the water in the entire underwater mansion was shaken by Yang Chen's arm and turned into a monstrous wave. Even if everyone was at the bottom of the water, they could still feel the power of the waves. Their bodies couldn't help but move a few steps with the waves before they stood still. Is this the real sea strength realm? Ho Yun's eyes shone brightly, and he immediately asked in surprise after standing still. Ho Yun always thought that the sea strength realm was just a description of the realm, and it was not necessarily possible to really achieve it. However, the shock of Yang Chen's lifting of the heavy, as if it was light, made him really feel the movement of the sea strength realm. Ho Yun couldn't help but be excited. Yang Chen's present was Ho Yun's future. They were all cultivating the yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique. When he thought that he could do this in the future, Ho Yun couldn't help but be excited. When Ho Yun said this, the others also had some idea. Just now, wasn't it like an overturning of the rivers and seas? Yang Chun did not directly answer Ho Yun's question, but under the gaze of everyone, he slowly lifted his foot and then seemingly floated down. Chapter 1560. Everyone watched as Yang Chen's feet touched the ground, and then everyone felt an invincible force from Yang Chen's feet began to spread to the surroundings. The entire underwater palace began to shake violently, and the rumbling sound began to sound from under Yang Chen's feet and spread throughout the entire underwater palace. The violent shaking lasted for a full half an incense stick of time, and everyone had to steady their horse stance, resisting the impact of this irregular movement, that even the ground began to move up and down. After half an incense stick of time, the underwater palace's ground returned to calm, and then the underwater palace's shaking slowly stopped. This is the earth-penetrating strength. Ho Yun's eyes were already as big as a copper bell. The realm that he didn't even dare to think about before appeared in front of him, It appeared in Yang Chen's body. Maybe in the future it would appear in his body. Thinking of that possibility, Ho Yun, who had always been arrogant, was slightly trembling with excitement. Yes, the real, earth-penetrating strength and sea-overturning strength. Yang Chen finally answered. His heart was also filled with an indescribable joy. He originally thought that at least when he broke through the human immortal tribulation, it was possible to break through, but he didn't expect to get inspiration from Fatty Jing, comprehend the truth of the combination of hardness and softness, and truly entered the realm of earth-penetrating strength. These realms of the yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique in the immortal world, not many people could fully achieve it. More than 99% of the yellow turban strongman reached the limit of sea-overturning strength, and it was impossible to break through again. The two realms of earth-penetrating strength and sky-raising strength were once regarded as legends. At least Yang Chun had never seen these two realms of yellow turban strongman. Now that Yang Chun himself had reached the realm of earth-penetrating strength, he realized how superficial his understanding of strength was in the past. However, it was not too late to understand now. It was definitely 100 million times better than being kept in the dark for a lifetime. Now if he faced Jing Hu again, Yang Chun was sure that he could send Jing Hu flying with a punch, and there was a great possibility that Jing Hu would be injured. Of course, the prerequisite was that Jing Hu, a heavenly immortal expert, would stand still and allow him to attack. Otherwise, if he couldn't hit him, there wouldn't be any effect at all. Entering the Conch underwater residence was definitely one of the best decisions that Yang Chun had ever made. Otherwise, how could he have gotten the chance to unleash his strength so wantonly? What kind of opponent would allow him to attack without retaliating? However, up until now, Yang Chun had not seen Jing Hu's figure. Where did this fatty go? Where's Senior Jing? Yang Chun asked immediately after realizing this. Not waiting for Gao Yu to answer, Yang Chen's spiritual consciousness had already discovered the figure of Jing Hu swimming over from a distance. Jing Hu didn't hide his figure. Everyone sensed it, but no one answered Yang Chun. Jing Hu's speed was very fast. In just a moment, he had reached everyone's side. Seeing Yang Chun, the small eyes on his round face glared, and he immediately asked angrily, "What were you doing just now?" Junior had a slight understanding. "I hope Senior Jing is magnanimous enough to forgive me." Yang Chen's attitude did not change because of his breakthrough. The other party was a heavenly immortal expert, a terrifying expert who could kill them at any time. Jing Hu circled around Yang Chen twice. His spiritual consciousness also scanned Yang Chen a few times. Yang Chen just smiled and let Jing Hu do what he wanted without showing any impatience. "There seems to be a change. I can't tell." Jing Hu dropped this sentence, then immediately turned to Gao Yu and asked, "Do you still have that pill?" "It's a very interesting pill. That's the 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill that my husband personally refined. If you want, my husband should have more." At this time, how could Gao Yu not know how to make Yang Chun take the initiative to explain the origin of the pill? There's still some questioning inner heart pills. If Senior needs them, just ask. Yang Chun did not hesitate to take out a jade bottle. There were at least 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pills inside. He handed it to Jing Hu's fat hands without any hesitation and casually suggested, "It's best to take one every 100 years. That way, the effect will be the best." "You're a straightforward person. I like it." Jing Hu liked Yang Chen's straightforward attitude. He immediately put away the jade bottle and patted Yang Chen's shoulder. His eyes then turned to Gong Sunling and said, "Do you want some more delicious food?" Of course, this request would not be refused. Everyone sat together again and began eating and drinking. While eating and drinking, Jing Hu finally asked about the purpose of Yang Chun and the others. "You've been here for quite some time now. What are your plans?" "After discovering the underwater mansion, we came in to have a look. Then, we found you, Senior." Yang Chun answered skillfully. "Is there only Senior in this underwater mansion? Why haven't I seen anyone else? I'm the only one here. Of course, you can't see anyone else." Jing Hu replied with food in his mouth while he was eating. He didn't mean to hide anything at all. "This is all mine. No one can touch it." Yang Chun made no sound, picked up the wine glass, and touched Jing Hu's glass. After drinking the Jade Dragon wine, Yang Chun asked intentionally or unintentionally, "Senior, do you spend all your heaven's tribulations here?" "Of course." Jing Hu took a big mouthful of food and said vaguely, "I haven't gone out. Of course I spend it here." "Senior, I'm a little curious. There is no thunder tribulation, fire tribulation, and wind tribulation outside. How did Senior survive these 3 disasters?" Yang Chen's words became more and more casual. Listening to Yang Chen's question, everyone understood. No wonder Yang Chen said that this was the secret of the parting hatred sea. It turned out that there was such an amazing secret hidden here. There were no 3 disasters in the spiritual world. There were only human immortal tribulations for the peak of human immortal, earthly immortal tribulations for the peak of earthly immortal, and celestial immortal tribulations for celestial immortals. There were also 3 tribulations, but the difficulty was many times higher than in the mortal world. Moreover, each tribulation had 99 tribulations, which were called 100 tribulations. Every time they changed to another world, the tribulations would be greatly increased. The immortal world was even more terrifying. Both Xian immortal tribulations and golden immortal tribulations had 999 tribulations, which were called 1,000 tribulations. As for the zenith heaven golden immortal, there were 9,999 tribulations. If he really survived, he would become a real, innumerable tribulation true immortal. The immortal world didn't have the tribulations of the spiritual world, and the spiritual world didn't have the tribulations of the mortal world. This also led to the fact that although the natives of the spiritual world were born with very strong cultivation, they could never become real human immortals without experiencing the real 3 disasters and tribulations. At this point, the natives of the spiritual world were not as good as Mu Mingyuan, Yang Lan, and Yang Lan, who were masters who ascended with their strong cultivation base. At least they still had hope to improve, but the natives didn't even have a chance to improve. Jing, who had always been alone. Obviously, he was the natives of the spiritual world. So how did he become an expert of the 8th grade of Fairy Immortal? There was obviously a great secret in it. Chapter 1561. "Oh, there's a big house in this underwater mansion that can trigger the calamity you mentioned." Jing, who was relatively naive, he directly revealed the secret that everyone wanted to know. "Senior, this is related to the safety of the entire underwater mansion. Don't say this to anyone in the future." At this moment, after getting all the words out, Yang Shan began to seriously remind Jing Hu, if other people know, Senior's safety will be in danger. Listening to Yang Chen's words, Jing Hu's gaze became a little strange. After looking at Yang Shan for a long time with an inexplicable look, Jing Hu smiled and nodded. "You're a good person. Your words are also very pleasant to hear. Very good. Very good." As he spoke, Jing Hu nodded and said a few words of very good. In the end, he looked solemn and said very seriously, "If you don't say anything, I plan to keep you all here to accompany me and never go out again." Jing Hu's character was simple, but this didn't mean he was stupid. None of the Heaven Immortal experts were simple, especially after swallowing a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill from Yang Chun. Even if he couldn't think of it for a while, a few months' time was enough for him to think clearly about some things. The words just now were also expressed through Yang Chen's mouth to express the meaning of the test. Everyone was awestruck, secretly thinking that it was a close call. This time, if it wasn't for Yang Chen's timely response, maybe he could only stay here to accompany Jing Hu. An 8th grade Heaven Immortal expert wanting to keep a few human immortal juniors was completely no problem. Even if Yang Chen's yellow turban strongman body refining technique had been cultivated to the earth-penetrating strength realm, he still couldn't escape. You have a good mind for the sake of these pills in the future, you and your wife who can cook, and plus the one who can brew wine. If there's anything you need, come here to treat me to delicious food. I'll help you if I can." Jing Hu's face regained its smiling look, "But you promised someone to come and cook for me. You can't go back on your word." "Don't worry, Senior. After this junior goes out, I will immediately find a suitable chef to send to Senior." How could Yang Chun not care about this kind of thing? He quickly agreed. Come, let's continue drinking. Everyone's main goal had been achieved, so they immediately forgot about all the danger they had just faced and began to drink again. Senior, if my husband brings a few suitable juniors here to undergo the tribulation, would you be able to help? Yang Chen didn't talk about this later, but Gao Yu was a smart woman. She immediately took the opportunity of serving the dishes and asked, "Those calamities can only be triggered once every 3 years. In any case, they're just sitting there. It's not like they can't be used if someone needs them." Jing, who seemed to have understood a lot of things with the help of the questioning inner heart pill during this time, and his speech was very organized. However, you have to promise me a few conditions. Senior, please speak. Yang Shan originally planned to talk about this topic after everyone had walked around a few more times. Since Gao Yu had already asked and Fatty Jing had also given an answer, Yang Chun could no longer remain silent and immediately took the initiative to take over the topic. First, I don't have a good cultivation method yet. The one you have is good. Can you teach it to me? Jing, who pointed to Yang Chun, Ho Yun, and Gao Yu and immediately put forward the first condition. The fairy Immortal Master was really knowledgeable. He had long discovered that Yang Chun, Ho Yun, and Gao Yu had all cultivated the 10th Water True Secret Art, so he was not polite at all. No problem. Yang Chun nodded without hesitation and immediately put it into action. A piece of jade slip that recorded the 10th Water True Secret Art and a large bottle of 10th Water True Essence were directly handed to Jing Hu's hands. The conch underwater mansion was originally at the bottom of the sea and had a pure 10th water attribute. He believed that after Jing, who cultivated the original cultivation method, his cultivation base would become more and more powerful. Maybe he could be promoted to the 9th grade of the fairy immortal realm in the near future. Second, only the 3 of you can come in with people. There can't be more people at a time. Jing, who was not ambiguous and immediately gave Yang Chun, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling 3 jade plates in return. Believe me, after you go out, it will be difficult to find the underwater mansion again. These 3 jade plates can bring you in. Before it was agreed that it should be Yang Chun, Gong Sunling, and Sun Qingxue who made the wine, but at this time Jing, who seemed to have ignored this problem, and gave the jade plate directly to Gao Yu. Of course, the 3 of them would not say it. Anyway, Yang Chun had distiller's yeast and could take it out at any time, so they did not have to worry about not having enough wine to drink. There's no problem with this. 3 disasters happened once every 3 years. At most, Yang Chun could only bring 3 people in at a time. There would not be many people. As for only the 3 of Yang Chun, there was no objection. This was the capital of the rise of Chunyang Palace in the future. Yang Chun would not agree to give it to others. Third, when the time is right, you have to bring me outside to broaden my horizons. Jing, who did not mean to be polite from the beginning to the end, he put forward one condition after another. A person who cultivated to the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm did not even have the ability to judge the enemy's cultivation base, simply because he had no horizons. If he wanted to go further in the future, he could only broaden his horizons and see more local customs. This situation was very similar to Ho Yun in the past. No problem at all. If Senior is willing, you can also be a loyal elder in my Chunyang Palace and use the disciples of Chunyang Palace at any time. While Yang Chen agreed, he did not forget to rope him in. When necessary, it is not a problem to arrange a worldly experience for Senior. The last one, if you want to refine any medicinal pills in the future, you have to give me a few to satisfy my craving. The last condition seemed to have appeared because of the questioning inner heart pill. Many cultivators wanted to ask Master Yang to refine medicinal pills, but could not get it. Jing, who was not embarrassed at all when he put it forward. Deal, Senior, deal. Yang Chun agreed without hesitation. It was absolutely worth it to exchange a few medicinal pills for the rise of Chunyang Palace in the spiritual realm. What was the point of refining medicinal pills? Wasn't it an exchange for more benefits? Now what Yang Chen promised was an exchange. This time, everyone had reached a complete agreement, and the guests and the host were happy. Of course, the host here had no intention of entertaining guests at all. Even the wine and dishes were prepared by the guests, but the host ate happily. It was also a rare scenery on the road of cultivation. Jing, who ate and drank to his heart's content, and got drunk again. However, before he got drunk, he did not forget to send everyone out of the underwater mansion. The people who were drinking suddenly went from the bright underwater mansion to the dark Lihan seabed. Everyone was amused and inexplicable. This Jing, who did not seem to play cards according to common sense at all. He was really an eccentric person. Ho Yun began to search for the conch where the underwater mansion was located on the seabed, but Yang Chun smiled and stopped him. No need to look, old Ho. You can't find it. Chapter 1562. At the bottom of the hatred-parting sea, there were at least 800 million conches like this. It was impossible to find a conch with the underwater mansion hidden among so many conches. Yang Chun didn't say that it was a critical time to find the underwater mansion. Not to mention Ho Yun, even a peak sky immortal expert might not be able to find it. Ho Yun looked down and didn't seem to believe it. He had just come out of the underwater mansion and was standing here. Obviously, the underwater mansion was not far away. As long as he found all the conches within a radius of 5 kilometers, wouldn't he be able to find the underwater mansion easily? Except for Ho Yun, the others believed Yang Chen's words. Only Ho Yun didn't believe it. There was no other way. They could only sit there and slowly taste the wine while waiting for Ho Yun to search through all the conches within a radius of 5 kilometers. However, he still couldn't find the underwater mansion where Jing Hu was. This is strange. Ho Yun walked to the side of the crowd angrily. He grabbed the wine pot from the table and gulped it down. Then he slammed it on the table and said unhappily, "You found the underwater mansion with a casual grab. That's because Senior Jing, who didn't put any restrictions on it. I only had one chance." Yang Chun smiled and explained, "Now, even if you hold the underwater mansion in your hand, you can't be sure whether it's the underwater mansion or not. If you have the leisure time, you should look around and see if there are any spirit veins." Not being able to find the underwater mansion, everyone was a bit disappointed. However, when they thought that Yang Chun and Gao Yugong Sunling had the jade medallions and could come to the bottom of the sea to summon the underwater mansion at any time, they became excited. After so many years, everyone had been in Chunyang Palace and had a strong sense of belonging to the sect. An underwater mansion that could allow the indigenous people of the spirit realm to go through the tribulation might not be of much help to a big sect. However, for a sect like Chunyang Palace, which had no foundation, it was simply a heaven-sent opportunity for development. No wonder Yang Chun said that the sky immortal level spirit vein was not a secret of the hatred-parting sea. Compared to the conch underwater mansion, that spirit vein was worthless. With this underwater mansion, Chunyang Palace can cultivate a human immortal native every 3 years after passing the tribulation. After 1,000 years, Chunyang Palace would have more than 300 disciples, not including those who had ascended. In any case, it could be regarded as a sect that could stand firm. Of course, such important news had to be reported to the sect as soon as possible. Everyone was no longer in the mood to leisurely swim at the bottom of the sea. They all requested to rush back to the sect. Along the way, no one asked Yang Chun how he knew that there was a heaven immortal level spirit vein at the bottom of the sea of parting hatred, much less how he randomly picked up a conch and found the one with the underwater mansion. After so many years, everyone was already used to the mysteriousness that Yang Chun displayed. This time, they were really used to such a result with just 2 small attacks. After not seeing it for a year, the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace already had a little shape. The head of the palace and several elders have organized at least thousands of years of indigenous people of the spiritual world to join the sect. These indigenous people with at least the peak Yuanying stage were now building the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace from scratch, according to the design of the head of the palace. If the cultivators of the mortal world knew that the masters of the peak Yuanying stage could only be used as construction workers, it was not known how many people would have their jaws broken. Seeing that Yang Chun and the others returned, the head of the palace and several elders were very happy. They came up and asked about their well-being. After taking care of them, they asked about the harvest of their trip. "I found a spirit vein of heaven immortal level." Ho Yun's mouth was fast and he could not hide his words. When the head of the palace asked, he immediately blurted it out. Spirit vein of heaven immortal level. Without waiting for Ho Yun to say the following words, the head of the palace and Elder Meng Xian had already stood up excitedly, as if they couldn't believe it. They turned directly to Yang Chun and Gao Yu and confirmed with surprise, is it really a spirit vein of heaven immortal level? Among the disciples in front of them, only Yang Chun and Gao Yu and Gong Sunling were absolutely reliable. The words of others had to be discounted. Ho Yin had done this kind of thing before. Now he was finally suspected by the head of the palace, which made him lose face. Really? Yang Chun nodded with a smile. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling next to him did not speak, but when their husband spoke, they also nodded heavily. With the guarantee of Yang Chen's family of 3, the head of the palace seemed to have put down a big stone in his heart. The smile on his face could no longer be suppressed and immediately bloomed. Elder Meng Xian, next to him, was even more direct. He stood in the same place and began to laugh. Wang Yong, Elder Gao Shiyin, and Elder Zheng Feng, who were sitting, were also full of smiles. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts. With this spirit vein of heaven immortal level, the development of Chunyang Palace in the future would no longer have any shackles. It was not a dream to ascend to the top of the sect. When they thought that the originally unknown Chunyang Palace had grown into a big sect comparable to the super sect in the hands of several people present, everyone was extremely proud. Even if they ascended immediately and saw the ancestors of Chunyang Palace, they dared to raise their heads and say to the ancestors that the disciples were not ashamed. Such a great achievement. In the history of Chunyang Palace, it was estimated that no one could match it except the ancestors. It was not an exaggeration to say that there was no one in the history of the Chunyang Palace who had deceived the ancestors. In addition to cultivation, what were the cultivators looking for? Wasn't it just this sense of achievement of bringing glory to the ancestors? The people present could be said to have fully achieved this, and with this spirit vein of heaven immortal level, they could do better in the future. Good, good, good. The head of the palace didn't know what to use to describe it, but a series of good words revealed his mood at the moment. Several elders looked at the face of Yang Chun, and they kept nodding in their hearts. Accepting this disciple was absolutely the right choice. Although no one said it, everyone knew that the spirit vein of heaven immortal level must have been discovered by Yang Chun, and no one would ever doubt this. Yang Chun insisted on taking a few troublesome guys out for a stroll, and several core executives were looking forward to the surprise of their return. Sure enough, as soon as they came back, it was such a surprise. Yang Chun had never let them down. The spirit vein is nothing. Ho Yin was left alone for a while, and his heart was a bit sour. After seeing that everyone had accepted the surprise, he said slowly, "Later, we found something better." It was rare for Ho Yin to be willing to perform like this. Yang Chen's family and the old tree demon did not steal Ho Yun's limelight and let him slowly sell the suspense. The spirit vein of heaven immortal level is nothing. Several core executives trembled in their hearts, and they suppressed the excitement in their hearts. Elder Wang Yong asked in a deep voice, "What good things did you find?" Chapter 1563. In fact, it's nothing. I just found an aqua mansion. Ho Yin saw that everyone's attention was focused on himself, and he was even more proud, and said slowly in a calm tone, "Aqua mansion." Hearing Ho Yun show off, the head of the palace and Elder Meng Xian, who had just sat down, stood up again. Standing with them were Elder Gao and Elder Zheng. The only one who could sit was Wang Yong. What kind of aqua mansion? How big is it? What's inside? This was the question that everyone was concerned about, and Elder Zheng Feng asked before the head of the palace. No one knew better than the top executives of the Chunyang Palace what a good immortal's cave meant. The Chunyang Palace in the mortal world had a blue vault mountain immortal's cave. The entire sect had the last reliance and capital. They were no longer afraid of being bound by the narrow territory of Meiqing Mountain and the vigorous development of the sect. Although there was the expansion of the demon continent in the later period, the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave had always been regarded as the top secret of the Chunyang Palace. Only the most loyal disciples had the opportunity to enter the Blue Vault Mountain Immortals cave to cultivate after going through many tests. It not only had a complete cultivation environment, but also left a large number of cultivation classics. After Yang Chen's sorting, almost half of them had become the collection of the Chunyang Palace. In the forbearance stage, at least 80% of the masters of the Chunyang Palace were hidden in the Blue Vault Mountain Immortals cave. Unfortunately, the most suitable place for the Blue Vault Mountain Immortals cave was still in the mortal world. Before the head of the palace ascended, he handed over the Immortals cave to the current palace master, Shang Wanfeng. Now that they heard that there was the same Immortals cave in the spiritual world, even if it was a pure aqua mansion, it was also a hidden card, and everyone could not help but be surprised. At this moment, what everyone was most concerned about was the level of this aqua mansion, how big it was, and what kind of help it could bring to the sect. It's just that Ho Yun's mouth was cheap, and he was slowly selling it over there, which made people gnash their teeth. Seeing that the faces of several elders were not right, Ho Yun coughed softly and continued the topic just now. It was to answer Elder Zhang's question, how big it is we don't know, and what is in it is not very clear. Then what did you discover? When they heard Ho Yun say that he didn't know anything, the elders were so angry that they almost cursed him. You don't know anything, and you're keeping us in suspense. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew he couldn't beat Ho Yun, the irascible Elder Meng Xian would have already pounced on Ho Yun to teach him a lesson. We found an 8th-tier heaven immortal expert. Before Elder Meng Xian could flare up, Ho Yun's next words gave everyone a fright. What kind of concept was an 8th-stage heavenly immortal expert? In the territory of Equal Gate Sect, everyone had seen heaven immortal experts. Those heaven immortal experts came with good intentions, but even so, the aura that they inadvertently leaked could make everyone keep quiet out of fear. It could be said that a heaven immortal expert didn't need to be at the 8th stage. As long as he was a 1st-stage heaven immortal, if he really made a move now, even if Chunyang Palace had Longxian on their hands, they would still end up being annihilated. You didn't offend that expert, did you? Elder Gao asked cautiously. What he was most afraid of hearing was that Ho Yun had a bad temper and offended others. Offended? No, not at all. Ho Yun answered quickly this time, shaking his head directly like a rattle drum. Just when everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief, Ho Yun added very casually, when we came up, the 3 of us surrounded him and beat him violently. I, old Ho, smashed him at least a few dozen times. I didn't offend anyone. Poof! Ancestor Wang Yong, who had been sitting on the fishing platform, just drank a mouthful of tea. When he heard Ho Yun's words, he couldn't help but spit it out. Elder Zheng was even more shocked and sat back in his seat. As for the palace master and Elder Meng and Elder Zheng, they had been stunned by Ho Yun's words and could not speak for a long time. Didn't offend anyone? He came up and beat him violently, smashed him dozens of times. This was called not offending anyone. Then what was offending people? Could it be that only killing the whole family, digging the grave, and whipping the corpse was considered offending? Ho Yun wanted this effect. It was rare for a few core executives to be fooled by him. Seeing the performance of everyone, Ho Yun laughed forward and backward and could not stop. AI. Looking at Ho Yun's laughter, how could everyone not know that they were fooled by Ho Yun? The palace master shook his head and sighed for a while. There was such a playful guy in his sect who had a headache. Elder Meng directly ignored Ho Yun and turned to Yang Chun and Gao Yugong Sunling. There was a reliable disciple who didn't ask, but he asked the guy who didn't match. Everyone deserved to be fooled. What the hell is going on? Elder Meng asked aloud. Of course, the target of his question was Yang Chen's family. Even the old tree demon next to him was more realistic than Ho Yun. What old Ho said is right. It is true that he came up and beat him violently. Yang Chun replied with a smile. However, old Ho smashed him dozens of times. Nothing happened to him, but old Ho was sent flying by him. What the hell is going on? The palace master also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ho Yun, this guy was not bragging. He just left half a sentence without saying it. At this moment, everyone's interest was aroused, and naturally, they urged Yang Chun to give a detailed account. Hearing that the master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm didn't know his own strength at first, and ran away when he saw people, everyone sighed. Later, Yang Chun captured a master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm with a table of wine and dishes. The ups and downs of the plot, the huge contrast before and after made several elders in the sect surprised. When they heard that Yang Chun actually completely suppressed a master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm in terms of strength, everyone's eyes swept around Yang Chun. It seemed that Yang Chun's cultivation had not changed much, but they didn't know how effective Yang Chun's breakthrough was. Of course, the most important news was always the last to come out. When they heard that there were 3 disasters in the underwater mansion, even if it was only once in 3 years, even the calmest ancestor Wang Yong, who had been sitting still, could not sit still and stood up to ask about the specific things. The 3 of you made an agreement with Senior Jing, who to allow you to take people in to cross the tribulation. This news was so incredible that after everyone heard it, their first reaction was not joy, but extreme suspicion. After getting affirmative answers from Yang Chun and everyone's mouths, and after seeing the 3 jade cards, several core executives sat back in their original seats in shock. They all fell into contemplation and no longer had the mood to talk. With this underwater mansion, why can't my Chunyang Palace prosper? The palace master finally patted the armrest of the chair and stood up, laughing. Chapter 1564. After experiencing the ups and downs of their mood, falling from the clouds to hell, and then flying back to the clouds, several core executives of Chunyang Palace finally fully understood what happened. And at the same time, they also understood what kind of opportunity Chunyang Palace was facing. They didn't dare to say anything else in the spiritual world, but the natives were at least hundreds of billions. Not to mention far away, just the Sunset Rock plus Linyang River, there were hundreds of millions. The fact that the head of the palace could find thousands of natives above the peak Yuanying stage in just a few months had already explained everything. So many disciples with good qualifications, just because they had not experienced the tribulation, they could not become real human immortals. How big of a loss was this for a sect? Now, with this underwater mansion, Chunyang Palace could carefully select suitable people from the natives to cross the tribulation in the future and develop and strengthen the strength of the sect. Several core executives who wanted to make the sect prosperous were so happy that they were about to explode. This secret must not be leaked. For how to use this favorable condition to strengthen the sect, the head of the palace and several elders were 1,000 times more experienced than Yang Chun in specific affairs, and they immediately told everyone to keep it confidential. As for the following things, Yang Chun didn't have to worry about it anymore, as long as the time came to take people to cross the tribulation. Of course, everyone understood the importance of confidentiality, and they knew what to do without the instructions of the head of the palace. Next, it was natural for the head of the palace to select suitable people to join the Chunyang Palace, and Yang Chun didn't have to worry much. This time, the main purpose of coming back was to tell the head of the palace about these 2 news. Now that the purpose has been achieved, Yang Chun and the others could not help in the sect, so they left together. However, Yang Chun had no intention of finding out any more secrets. He just had to wait for the arrival of Tao Junkie on the sea. In this regard, Ho Yun and the others were certainly not so willing. So Ho Yun, the old tree demon, Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, the 4 monster race masters, were separated from Yang Chen's family in the sect. Several of them had to go to the Sunset Rock and Linyang River together to see what good things they could find. Yang Chen really didn't plan to make any big movements in the near future. Whether it was the spiritual vein or the underwater mansion, it was because these 2 things could be of great use to the sect, and they could let the disciples of the sect have enough confidence in the most timely manner. For the current Pure Yang Palace, these 2 things were enough. At present, Chunyang Palace was still a small sect. Excluding Long Xian, it only had a few human immortals. It was very tender. At present, the fact that it could get its hands on the Sunset Cliff, the river of overlooking sun, and the sea of parting hatred to establish a sect was already its limit. If even greater benefits were to appear, others would surely set their eyes on it and devour it whole. For the time being, Yang Chun finally had a little leisure time. Now was not the time to go out. So the most correct way to improve his cultivation was to stay in the sect or on the sea of parting hatred to recuperate and improve his cultivation. The Dragon Palace was more suitable for the Immortal's cave in the water than any other underwater mansion. During the time of waiting for Tao Junki, the Yang family of three transformed the Dragon Palace into a simple sea palace with only a few small rooms on the Lihan Sea. All day long, they were either fishing or watching the scenery, or they were with their two wives under the moonlight, drinking wine and eating delicacies. This kid had a comfortable life. As early as when they were in the mortal world, Yang Chun and Tao Junki had made an agreement that Tao Junki would definitely pay attention to the news of Yang Chun's ascension, and then when Yang Chun settled down, she would rush over to meet him. Previously, Chunyang Palace destroyed the Chiman sect and released the prolonging life pill. He believed that Tao Junki would soon know such a big event. Naturally, Chunyang Palace's new territory was also known to the world, and Tao Junki knew where to find Yang Chun. Fairy Junki was born in the mortal world of Taishaman, the profound heaven sect in the spiritual world. Now the relationship between the profound heaven sect and other sect was tense. Fairy Junki could not meet Yang Chun in Chunyang Palace, so she could only be at sea. During the time of waiting for Tao Junki, Yang Chun also did another thing. When Yang Chun was chased by Luo Yuan, a master of the Deshang stage, the octopus, Lan Ning, who helped Yang Chun kill Luo Yuan, had already ascended for thousands of years. He didn't know how she was doing now. At that time, Lan Ning left a monster power crystal, and Yang Chun activated it on his own residence in the sea of parting hatred. He believed that if Lan Ning was not dead, she would definitely be able to feel his monster power. Yang Chun and Lan Ning had only met once. Everyone helped each other. Yang Chun didn't know if this would lead to Lan Ning. However, if Lan Ning gave him face and came, Yang Chun didn't mind taking care of Lan Ning. After all, several things in the mortal world were also thanks to Lan Ning. It was always Yang Chun's habit to repay kindness. Wu Xiong, Elder Wu, and Yang Chun were close friends. When Elder Wu ascended, Yang Chun also instructed Elder Wu to collect 1 or 2 immortals' caves after coming to the spiritual world. Elder Wu was a rogue cultivator. If there was no sect to rely on in the spiritual world, it would be difficult. Yang Chun didn't know if Elder Wu would take the initiative to visit after hearing the recent reputation of Chunyang Palace and Yang Chun. Lady Fanghua had already ascended, and now she must be in Yin Yang Demon School. Yang Chun's other wives and concubines had just arrived at the spiritual world sect not long ago. They were the disciples of the lowest generation. In the past, no matter how talented they were in the mortal world, they could only obediently listen to the arrangement of the sect. It was estimated that they would not have a chance to meet in a short time. They could only wait for them to cultivate in the sect for a period of time and then reunite. Even if Yang Chun had 10,000 years of memory from his previous life, he still couldn't know what would happen to these people who had changed their life trajectories by Yang Chun. He could only passively wait for the news. This was also something that couldn't be helped. The years of cultivation were not fighting and killing all day long. Peaceful cultivation was the real key. Yang Chun was very glad that he had so many confidants to accompany him in this life. For now it could not be said that they were confidants, but family members. This life wasn't as lonely as it was in his previous life, and it wasn't like his previous life where he had to hide from place to place all day long. In his previous life, Yang Chun, Yang Lan, and the Taishaman were mortal enemies. Now that the mortal world's hatred had been avenged, Yang Lan probably would not feel good. Now Yang Chun should slowly plan how to deal with the Xintian sect in the spiritual world. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling really enjoyed the feeling of only the two of them being with their husband. Without others to disturb them, it was calm and peaceful. If it weren't for the shadow of the Xintian sect in their hearts, they really wanted to live a simple life like this. Unfortunately, the spiritual world was not a blessed land that stood aloof from worldly affairs. The peaceful life of the three was quickly broken. Just after Yang Chun waited for more than a year, A powerful divine sense quickly enveloped the three of them and unscrupulously explored the place where the three of them were. "Who has my demon power crystal?" After a while, an unusually charming voice sounded in the ears of the three of them, and at the same time, a huge black shadow appeared under the sea. Chapter 1565. Senior Lan. "This junior is here." Hearing this voice, Yang Chun immediately stood up and took out the demon power crystal left by Lan Ying from the Chinquan bag, held it in his hand, and said loudly to the sea, "It's you, little doll." Hearing Yang Chen's words and seeing the demon power crystal in Yang Chen's hand, the huge black shadow underwater quickly became smaller, instantly turned into a blue light, and came not far in front of Yang Chen. A water blue gauze wrapped in a graceful and unusual figure, standing opposite the three people with a smile, who was not Lan Ying. However, he didn't know why. Yang Chen always felt that Lan Ying seemed to be a little tired. After not seeing each other for 1,000 years, Lan Ying's appearance didn't seem to have changed at all. She still looked the same as when she cultivated the transformation secret art. However, her cultivation base was very different. Now, Lan Ying at least had the cultivation base of the Earth Immortal Grade 3. Even in the spiritual world, she was not a soft persimmon that anyone dared to bully. "Senior Lan is still elegant, congratulations." Yang Chun smiled and cupped his hands at Lan Ying, and at the same time did not forget to introduce the two women beside him. "Senior, these two are my wives, the kindness of saving my life that day. This junior will always remember it in my heart." "Thank you, Senior." Gao Yu and Gong Sunling followed behind Yang Chun, and they were also very respectful and thanked her. "Thank you, Senior." This was the savior of their husband. How could they be courteous? "It's good that you are here. You can fight the enemy with me." The etiquette of the two women. Lan Ying just waved her hand as a greeting and said without any politeness, "There is a guy who has a helper and fought with me a few days ago. I am a little weak and I am at a disadvantage. With your help, I can kill them." As soon as she came up, she asked Yang Chun to help fight. Yang Chun didn't know whether to say that he was lucky or not, but since Lan Ying said so, Yang Chun also had to help. "Senior, wait a minute. It's not too late to take a rest first." No wonder Lan Ying looked tired. It turned out to be an opponent. As Yang Chun spoke, he reached out and handed over a 5 revolutions essence cultivating pill. 5th revolution pill? Good stuff. Lan Ying was also a knowledgeable person. At a glance, she saw that the medicinal pill was extraordinary. She reached out and took it. She did not guard against it and threw it into her mouth. 5 revolving essence culturing pill could restore vitality and replenish spiritual power. After a while, Lan Ying absorbed the potency of the pill, and her expression and momentum were restored. The feeling of being in high spirits was no longer faintly tired. Who is the opponent? What's his cultivation? Within the scope of Yang Chen's spiritual awareness, apart from Long Xian, there was no enemy who could become the opponent of Lan Ying. The other party must be far away, and there was plenty of time. Yang Chen did not mind asking clearly. "It's a woman. Her cultivation level is only at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage, but the magic treasures on her are truly powerful." When Lan Ying spoke, she still had an unconvinced posture. "Especially the fire seed on her body is very powerful. I can't do anything to her for a while." An opponent at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage shouldn't be able to do anything to Senior, right? Yang Chun was startled. The difference between the two sides seemed to be a bit too much. Lan Ying was not the kind of expert who came from the orthodox cultivation of a famous sect. Her cultivation of the 3rd stage of the Earth Immortal stage was estimated to be the result of fighting. It was a bit strange that she was forced like this by an opponent at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage. "If it's just her alone, she can't do anything to me," Lan Ying said hatefully, but she has a group of helpers, 12 wooden puppets. Their cultivation level is not very high, but they're very powerful when they cooperate with each other. It's just a draw. Just knowing that you are here, I pulled you as a helper. As long as you can hold 1 or 2 of them, I can end them. 12 wooden puppets? The fire seed on the woman's body was also very powerful. Listening to Lan Ying's description, The more Yang Chen thought about it, the more he felt that the opponent in Lan Ying's mouth should be Tao Junkie. Her natal true fire was pure true fire, and the 12 wooden puppets were, of course, 12 Penglai divine wood demons. With Tao Junkie's strength, after ascending for hundreds of years, she was almost in the realm of the 5th stage of the human immortal stage. Yang Chun had to ask clearly, otherwise if the flood rushed into the Dragon King temple, it would be a tragedy. Her magic weapon is very powerful. What kind of magic weapon is it? Yang Chen asked. A courtyard, can't move. Of course, Lanning would not hide it. She also thought that Yang Chen would help her, so she naturally had to introduce it clearly. Courtyard? The first thing that came to Yang Chen's mind was his own manner. The demon seal array on the periphery had the same protective ability even in the spiritual world. It was normal for Lanning of the Earth Immortal stage to be unable to move it. This time, Yang Chun and Gao Yu Gong Sunling were more and more sure that Lan Ying's opponent was Tao Junkie. Is it a manner? Yang Chun asked with a smile. Does she have a very fast iron-winged eagle? There's such a dead bird. Lanning seemed to have suffered a loss. When she answered, she extremely belittled her opponent, and the iron-winged eagle also became a dead bird. Fortunately, the dead bird is only fast in the air. It is not my opponent under the water. After saying so much, Lanning finally realized something and asked strangely, You haven't seen it. How do you know this? Senior, if this younger generation junior didn't guess wrong, Senior's opponent should be a concubine of this younger generation junior. Yang Chen replied with a wry smile. I don't know how she offended Senior, but I asked Senior to look at this younger generation junior's face and forgive her this time. When she arrives, this younger generation junior will let her apologize to Senior. With these words, Yang Chun put his own position very low. After all, it was his own savior. Since he knew that it was Tao Junkie, naturally he could not let them fight again. Tao Junkie would not disobey Yang Chen's meaning. Now that Yang Chun said some good words, it could also dispel Lan Ying's anger. Your concubine? Lanning looked at Gao Yu and Gong Sunling behind Yang Chun, and her eyes returned to Yang Chun. She is very beautiful. If she is really your concubine, you have good luck with women. After a word of praise, she immediately waved her hand. Since she is your concubine, I won't pursue it. I met her on the road and wanted to send a ticket to her. I didn't expect it to be so difficult. Knowing that this was the case, Lanning looked like a beautiful woman on the outside, but she was a robber in the sea who bullied the weak. When she encountered a cultivator whose cultivation base was not as good as her own, it was very normal to be tempted. It was a pity that she met Tao Junkie, who was armed by Yang Chun. The master of the 3rd grade of the Earth Immortal and the 5th grade of the Human Immortal fought to a draw and failed to succeed. During the conversation, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had already found the figure of Tao Junkie. Tao Junkie was now in the Yang family manor, urging the manor to rush in this direction. Her face was full of vigilance, and the 12 Penglai divine wood monsters around her were also careful, and they looked a little nervous. Junkie, come here. Yang Chun directly sent out a shock with his spiritual awareness and passed the message to Tao Junkie. Chapter 1566. Suddenly hearing the voice of her husband in her mind, Tao Junkie's face suddenly showed a happy expression. As long as she met with her husband, not to mention a 3rd grade Earth Immortal guy, no matter how high his cultivation was, he would also die. The 2 6th grade Earth Immortal guys of Chiman's sect, weren't they also killed by her husband? Overjoyed, Tao Junkie put away the manor, directly summoned the iron-winged eagle, and rushed over here. In a moment, she had crossed a distance of thousands of miles. Tao Junkie found the breath of Lan Ying in the distance. Strangely, her husband was also there. Tao Junkie was puzzled, but the speed of rushing over did not decrease, and she still went straight to Yang Chen's side. Junkie, this is my savior in the mortal world. There's a little misunderstanding with you. Don't pursue it. Before the person arrived, Tao Junkie heard the voice of her husband. Originally, Tao Junkie was just in a hurry. It was Lan Ying who attacked her for no reason. Now that her husband said so, Tao Junkie would certainly not say anything more. Since she was her husband's savior, she would return her life-saving grace and not care about it. Greetings, husband. Greetings, two sisters. When she came to Yangchun, Tao Junkie resisted her thoughts and greeted Yangchun and Gao Yugong Samling. She didn't look at Lanning next to her. It was already good that Lanning didn't attack her for no reason. Don't expect Tao Junkie to have a good face. Lanning was a little embarrassed because of the idea of hitting an acquaintance's concubine. She curled her lips and said nothing. It's been hard on you, Junkie. Yangchun pulled Tao Junkie up and hugged her in his arms and whispered in her ear. Tao Junkie ascended in the Langya well, which could be regarded as escaping the calamity of the Taishaman, and she didn't have to face the dilemma between her husband and other sisters in the sect, which was a good thing. However, her life after the ascension was not so good. In the beginning, Tao Junkie was valued by the sect with her excellent cultivation aptitude and pure true fire, origin fire. For the sect to win over a 5th-grade alchemist, it was a great achievement. But not long after, the news of the Taishaman's annihilation spread. After Tao Junkie ascended, she inevitably said some bad things about the young sect master, Li Liheng. When a mysterious heaven sect began to investigate the massacre of the Taishaman, they also investigated Tao Junkie. Yang Lan and Yang Lan must have spoken ill of Yangchun. Some people in the Xintian sect were naturally quite critical of Tao Junkie. Yangchun was just a small 5th-grade alchemist. He was nothing in the spiritual realm. There were plenty of 7th-grade alchemists in the mysterious heaven sect. Who knew when this future alchemy genius would die prematurely? Since the Taishaman had offended all the cultivators, Yangchun was no exception. With this, Tao Junkie's previous actions of joining Yangchun for the sake of the sect seemed to have become useless. In the sect, there began to be disciples like young Master Ishian who coveted Tao Junkie's beauty and suppressed her in many ways. Fortunately, Tao Junkie had resources prepared by Yangchun, so she was not in a difficult position in the sect. Being entangled, Tao Junkie simply followed Yangchun's arrangement and went to the sea alone to gain experience and rarely returned to the sect. Yangchun killed young Master Ishian, and Tao Junkie was investigated by the sect again. Tao Junkie did not feel much protection from the sect over the years. The happiest thing was to hear that her husband killed Zhu Ishian, who was entangled with her, as soon as he ascended. Originally, Tao Junkie planned to go to Yangchun as soon as she heard the news, but she was afraid that her actions would implicate her husband in Chunyang Palace. She was very clear about the situation in Chunyang Palace. If the Xintian sect really wanted to make a move, it would be enough to send a fairy immortal master. Therefore, Tao Junkie endured until Yangchun made a hit with the prolonging life pill and finally got the sunset rock, Lin Yangchuan, and the hatred parting sea. Knowing that Yangchun would definitely wait for her on the hatred parting sea, Tao Junkie did not rush over from the land, but slowly circled around from the sea. This circled for several years, and she was about to arrive, but a female robber appeared out of nowhere and did not say anything. Being held in her husband's arms, the warm and peaceful feeling made Tao Junkie hate to hold him like this for the rest of her life. Yangchun's words directly hit the softest part of Tao Junkie's heart. Her husband's words made Tao Junkie feel as if all the grievances she had previously suffered had disappeared. Her eyes involuntarily reddened, and crystalline tears began to well up in her eyes. However, she forcefully held them back and did not let them fall. If you want to cry, just cry. What do you mean by holding it back? Lan Ning, who was next to her, said a sentence that directly caused Tao Junkie, who was in Yangchun's arms, to glare at her. Lan Ning was also aware that she was in the wrong. She did not dare to look at Tao Junkie and turned her head guiltily. Don't worry. In the future, when the old monsters in your Xintian sect know that you can get the prolonging life pill from me, you will be able to get back all the grievances you have suffered. Yangchun did not just say it, but he directly gave Tao Junkie a very clear statement. Although only 4 prolonging life pills had been released, plus 10 in exchange for land, the shock caused among the cultivators had already been extremely sensational. Now, no one had come to ask for the pill. On the one hand, Everyone needed to further verify the efficacy of the prolonging life pill. On the other hand, some people had the idea of delaying to see if there would be any variables. The so-called variables were naturally to see if some people or some sect could get the prolonging life pill from Yangchun, or use some means to make Yangchun and Chunyang Palace yield. Compared with the mortal world, the cultivators of the spiritual world were more realistic. Tao Junkie's face finally had a smile. She could really throw herself into her husband's arms and enjoy his embrace. And this kind of gentle consideration, even a human immortal master would inevitably indulge in it. At this moment, the feeling of home was far more than that of the sect. "Husband, I brought our manor as well." When she said this, Tao Junkie seemed to be bragging about her achievements. This was the Yang family manor, the husband's manor, and our manor. However, when she heard this, Lanning had a strange look. It seemed that she had suffered a little loss on this manor. "Oh, by the way, boy, when I was fighting with your woman, I seemed to find someone following us from a distance. I don't know what kind of guy it is, but he didn't come out when he saw us fighting." When Tao Junkie talked about the manor, Lanning naturally remembered something related to them, and at this time she also said it. "Someone is following us." Tao Junkie's face suddenly turned pale. What was going on? Was it aimed at herself or at her husband? "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Yang Chen's hand that was holding Tao Junkie tightened slightly, and the soft words made her relax immediately. Chapter 1567. To be able to follow Tao Junkie, a 5th-grade human immortal master, and not be discovered by her, at least his cultivation base was higher than Tao Junkie, or he had a super strong invisibility magic weapon. It didn't matter who the opponent was now. The important thing was why he was following Tao Junkie. "Oh, Ling, you accompanied Junkie and talked for a while." Yang Chun let go of Tao Junkie, and then let Gao Yu and Gong Sunling accompany her. "My husband will go and see." After settling his family here, Yang Chun said to Lan Ing, "Senior, are you interested in sending a ticket? After I succeed, we will split it in half." Lan Ing, this guy was a lawless master. Without the control of the sect, she was tyrannical in the sea, and she liked to do this kind of thing the most. Listening to Yang Chun, he wanted to pull her to send a ticket. How could she not be happy? The depression that had accumulated on Tao Junkie before couldn't be found from Tao Junkie. How could she find a channel to vent her fire? "Let's go." Lan Ing answered directly, and then jumped into the sea first, and instantly changed back to the original appearance of the blue ring octopus in the sea. Entering the sea with Lan Ing was Yang Chun, who was driving the shuttle. In the sea, only the speed of the shuttle could keep up with Lan Ing. Tao Junkie watched Yang Chun and Lan Ing disappear, and the happiness in her heart was overflowing. As soon as her husband heard that he had been wronged, he couldn't get it back from Lan Ing, his savior, and immediately went to find trouble with the person who followed her. It could only show one thing, that was, her husband put her in his heart. Women, even if they were immortal women, would only be happy when they encounter this kind of thing. Since the other party followed Tao Junkie, it was obvious that whether it was good or bad, he was always targeting her. Seeing that she and Lan Ing were fighting, he didn't come up to help, which already showed that it was not a good way. Tao Junkie was not worried at all about whether Yang Chun would have any trouble. At this time, her heart was full of happiness, and she couldn't think of anything else. The Three Purities' secret arts, spiritual awareness, was released, and before he swam out 2,000 miles, Yang Chun found the guy who was tracking Tao Junkie. A Grade 2 Earth Immortal expert. No wonder he was discovered by Lan Ing. At this moment, that guy still did not know that he had been exposed, and was still carefully controlling the distance, as if he was afraid that Tao Junkie would discover him. Looking at this posture, it was clear that he definitely had a magical weapon on him that could track Tao Junkie's position. It was the same reason Wiley Li Hung had left a spiritual consciousness imprint on Tao Junkie in the past. The body of blue shadow firmly wrapped Yang Chun and the shuttle, and then quickly shrank to the size of an ordinary octopus, slowly approaching in that direction. Whether it was Lan Ing or Yang Chun, the spiritual awareness of both of them had surpassed the guy who was tracking them. It was easy to avoid his exploration. Within 2,000 miles, there were no other cultivators except for this guy who stayed in the same place and watched Tao Junkie from afar. Yang Chun and Lan Ying could safely make a bold move without worrying about disturbing anyone. It was a man sitting on a ship-shaped magical weapon. This magical weapon had been uniquely refined to hide most of the spiritual power fluctuations. If it was an ordinary human immortal master's spiritual awareness exploration, they would only think that this ship was a big fish. It seemed that this guy was specialized in doing this kind of thing. He was not in a hurry and always kept enough distance. He was a veteran. Unfortunately, he met Lan Ying and Yang Chun, and his experience technique was seen through. Just when he stopped in place and closed his eyes while paying attention to Tao Junkie's position, he was unaware that a small octopus had arrived at the bottom of his ship. A person from the profound heaven sect. Yang Chun had already seen the identity of the man and quietly conveyed it to Lan Ying. Kill him. Don't leave any future troubles. The other party was a person from the profound heaven sect. Letting him live and face Tao Junkie would always make it difficult for Tao Junkie. Yang Chun simply did not hold back and directly killed the opponent and destroyed the corpse, just as if this person had never appeared, so as not to make it difficult for Tao Junkie. Boom! When the two of them didn't make a move, it was earth-shattering. Lan Ying's two huge tentacles, at the same time, rolled the ship-shaped magical weapon. She had already taken a fancy to this magical weapon and wanted to control it. And Yang Chun also used the 9 nether flying sword at the same time, instantly wrapping all three of them in a thick black mist. Lan Ying had been practicing in the demon continent, and now she was already at the 3rd grade of the Earth Immortal realm. The demonic energy carried by the 9 nether flying sword had little effect on her. But the opponent was different. He, who had been cultivating smoothly, had never seen such vicious means, and his mind was instantly affected. The opponent was also an Earth Immortal Master, and this kind of mental influence could only last for a few moments. But for Lan Ying and Yang Chun, this short moment was enough. The two tentacles quietly approached the opponent's body, and at the same time, a blood-red flying sword had already stabbed straight at his chest and abdomen. The opponent had just got rid of the mental attack of the 9 nether flying sword, but his hands and feet had already been entangled by Lan Ying's tentacles. The reaction of the Earth Immortal opponent could not be said to be slow. In the face of the sudden attack, he summoned the flying sword with the fastest speed. He was planning to meet the opposite flying sword, but the place where his hands and feet were entangled was numb at the same time. The blue-ringed octopus was one of the most poisonous monster beasts in the ocean. Even if he was an Earth Immortal Master, in front of the poison of Lan Ying, who was higher than him, it was still not enough. Just between breaths, his whole body had been paralyzed, and even his brain worked a little slower. The blood-red flying sword mercilessly passed through his chest, entering his heart and flying out of his back, at the same time taking away all the blood in his body. Yang Chun and Lan Ying joined forces, and in an instant, this guy became a pale corpse. Lan Ying was not polite. Her tentacles rolled the corpse and sent it directly into her mouth. For the monster race, the corpse of this level of cultivator was also a great supplement. A few days ago, when fighting with Tao Junkie, there were some losses, so it was just right to make up for it. Yang Chun turned a blind eye to this. The monster race had the habits of the monster race. After cultivating, the monster race had to abide by the living habits of human beings. The important thing was that the other party was an enemy, and the enemy had been eliminated. The figures of the two appeared directly on the boat-shaped magic weapon that had been controlled by Lan Ying, and they were on the way home. Lan Ying looked very excited. The other party's Chinquan bag was in her hand, and she was dividing the loot one by one. As a lone thief, Lan Ying rarely had this kind of opportunity to divide the loot with others. The harvest this time was quite plentiful, and the resentment accumulated on Tao Junkie had dissipated by more than half. After happily dividing the loot, he happily counted his harvest. Senior, Junkie doesn't know the relationship between you and me. I have offended you. Yang Chun didn't look at those things and pushed them directly in front of Lan Ying. These things are Junkie's compensation to Senior. Good? Let's ride off. Lan was very happy to accept the things and waved her hand to express her attitude. At this moment, Yang Chun suddenly felt a palpitation. He didn't know what dangerous thing was about to happen. Chapter 1568. The sudden palpitation made Yang Chen's face turn pale in an instant. Lan next to him immediately noticed this and began to be alert quietly. At the same time, she was a little closer to Yang Chun and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" As she said this, Lan Ying's other hand had quietly put away all the things, leaving nothing behind. Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had already explored at least 2,000 miles around when he had just discovered that something was wrong. However, no matter how Yang Chun used his spiritual awareness to explore, he could not find any clues. Where did this feeling of palpitation come from? Unconsciously, in order to be able to find the source of the palpitation, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had begun to release madly. At the beginning, Lan next to him was still a little careless. She had also explored around, and there was no sign of danger. In the end, Lan was originally a sea creature and should be more sensitive to the danger in the sea than Yang Chun. Even she couldn't find the danger. Yang Chen's feeling must be wrong. However, with the crazy release of Yang Chen's spiritual awareness, Lan Ying's attitude has changed from carelessness to surprise. The strength of the spiritual awareness released by Yang Chun has surpassed Lan Ying's own, reaching the realm of the 4th grade of the Earth Immortal, and it was still increasing. The strength of the spiritual awareness shown by Yang Chun alone had already surprised Lan Ying. The problem was that with the kind of killing intent released by Yang Chun when he was aware of the danger, it made Lan Ying, who was close at hand, almost break her heart. How many creatures had to be killed to have such a fierce killing intent appear? Lan Ying asked herself that she had hunted countless creatures in the sea, and she was also a well-known ruthless character, but compared with the killing intent that Yang Chun had just released, it was nothing at all. Facing this fierce killing intent that was not released for herself at close range, Lan Ying was almost forced to the limit, and her spiritual awareness was raised to the strongest, barely resisting this direct and unreasonable killing intent, and her body began to tremble. If she didn't know that Yang Chun was definitely not targeting her, she would immediately show her true appearance and escape into the ocean and never dare to approach Yang Chun again. No, it's not here. Yang Chun finally realized that the source of danger was not here. The spiritual awareness of the 3 purities secret art has been released to the maximum. Even if it was a fairy immortal master, they could not escape from Yang Chen's combing. It was impossible for the Xian Immortal and Golden Immortal to appear in the spiritual world, let alone the great principal Golden Immortal. It was not until the moment when Yang Chen spoke that Lan Ying's nerves, which had been stretched to the limit, suddenly relaxed, and the ubiquitous sense of fear disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. However, at this moment, when Lan Ying looked at Yang Chun again, it was no longer with the kind of vision of a younger generation who had a relationship with the mortal world, but with another kind of attitude of respect that could not be expressed in words. Lan Ying had no doubt that if Yang Chun was willing, he could even kill her ruthlessly in a face-to-face encounter, and there would be no accident. What is it? The danger that could make Yang Chun so nervous was absolutely fatal. Lan Ying couldn't help but ask, and didn't notice that her tone seemed to have changed a little. I don't know. Yang Chun was still thinking about what the danger was, and answered subconsciously, and then immediately said in a very ordinary tone, Let's go back first. Good. Lan Ying also naturally agreed. The two of them did not dare to stay on the sea, and quickly rushed to the Dragon Palace. Until returning to the Dragon Palace, and seeing Gao Yugong Sunling and Tao Junki, there was still an unspeakable tension in Yang Chen's mind. That feeling was as if in his previous life, he was just a little Xian immortal who had just ascended to the immortal world and met a great principal golden immortal. Great principal golden immortal? As soon as this word appeared in his mind, Yang Chun suddenly woke up. That's right, this was the threat that only a great principal golden immortal could bring. However, this was the spiritual world. How could a great principal golden immortal of the immortal world come here? What kind of threat was that? It was as if he was about to be devoured, the fear of his body and soul being destroyed. For no reason. How could there be such a feeling? Devour? Yang Chun suddenly froze and suddenly thought of a possibility. In an instant, he could no longer sit still. He hurriedly told Gao Yu Gong Sunling and Tao Junkie, "Help protect me." He immediately sat down and began to run the three purities secret art to the extreme, trying to verify his guess. Gao Yu Gong Sunling and Tao Junkie didn't know what happened. Everyone looked at each other. After looking at each other a few times, they all focused their eyes on Lan Ying, who came back with Yang Chun. I don't know what happened. Lan Ying hurriedly waved her hand to show her innocence and quickly explained, "We teamed up to kill a guy who was tracking you. When we divided the booty, he suddenly found something wrong, but I couldn't find any threat." The three women also couldn't find any threats around them. Even if Gong Sunling used the mountain river geographical map to check tens of thousands of miles, she didn't find any problems, but her husband's feeling would definitely not be wrong. At the moment, without any hesitation, Gao Yu directly put away the Dragon Palace, and Gong Sunling waved everyone into the mountain river geographical map. There was no safer place than this. It was as if this was the only place that could make her husband safer. After doing all this, the women anxiously gathered around Yang Chun, not far from him, staring at Yang Chun nervously, for fear that he would have an accident. At this moment, Yang Chun has thoroughly figured out where his inexplicable palpitation came from. The root of the problem was still in the mortal world. When cultivating the three purities secret art to a certain extent, the spiritual awareness would split, and this Yang Chun had already done it. When the first spiritual awareness split, it was actually a seed of spiritual awareness that was left by Yang Chun in the immortal body in the mortal world. The immortal body was discovered by Yang Chun and the women in the secret plane left by a predecessor of Taishaman. The secret plane was only known to Yang Chun when the masters of Taishaman asked Yang Chun for advice with the ancient characters that they didn't know. At that time, Yang Chun gave Taishaman another very dangerous secret plane as a reply and caused Taishaman to suffer heavy losses. The real secret plane was explored by Yang Chun himself. Taishaman would not have an immortal body for no reason, nor would they put the immortal body in an ancient secret plane for no reason. Now that he thought about it, there is only one possibility for that immortal body. It was a means of profound heaven sect just in case. Chapter 1569. At first, Yang Chun couldn't figure out where the Taishaman's predecessors got the immortal body, especially one that was unconscious but still alive. Since there was such an immortal body, Yang Chun certainly wouldn't waste it. He left his own consciousness seed. Even if there was an accident in the future, with this immortal body, Yang Chun could start over again. It was even possible that his cultivation would be stronger than it was now. Now Yang Chun finally understood what the function of this immortal body was. It was the body of a great principal golden immortal that the immortal world's mysterious heaven sect had spent a lot of effort and paid a great price to get it from the immortal world. It was to prevent any major changes in the Taishaman one day so that they wouldn't even lose their inheritance. For a big sect with the inheritance of the immortal world's spiritual world, if the sect in the mortal world was destroyed, it meant that there would be no continuous replenishment in the future. Even if the sect in the immortal world was strong, it was rootless. There was no other possibility but to decline step by step. The Taishaman had been destroyed, so the mysterious heaven sect naturally became a castle in the air. Without a foundation, there was only one path left for them. Of course, the mysterious heaven sect wouldn't sit back and watch this happen. Therefore, the ultimate escape route that they had arranged in the past finally came in handy. The immortal world originally had the method of sending a consciousness clone to the mortal world, but it was expensive to use, so it was only used once every 100 years. Although no one would die because of it, at least 3 great principal golden immortals would have to pay the price of 1,000 years of cultivation. Only a big sect like the mysterious heaven sect could afford such a cost. Ordinary small sects couldn't afford it at all. If they had to pay such a price in the immortal world, at least one golden core stage disciple would have to pay the price in the mortal world. This didn't include the large number of materials needed to activate the formation. Even so, the consciousness clone could only convey one or two key messages in the mortal world. 99% of the memories of the consciousness clone in the mortal world would be lost, and only a few of the most profound points would be left. In addition to the consciousness clone, the mysterious heaven sect might have a way to completely transfer the consciousness of a great principal golden immortal to the mortal world. However, the bodies of ordinary experts in the mortal world simply could not accommodate the consciousness of a zenith heaven golden immortal, so there was the arrangement of an immortal body. The immortal body was the mysterious heaven sect's last resort to prevent the worst-case scenario. Now that the Taishaman in the mortal world had been exterminated, the sect had reached a point of life and death. Thus, it was only natural for the mysterious heaven sect to activate its immortal body. The empty celestial body was just a container that had been nourished inside the 7-treasure glazed box, quietly waiting for the mysterious heaven sect to use their last resort. Such an immortal body, of course, could not be used to descend to the lower realm with the consciousness avatar method of losing 99% of the memory. Instead, he used the method of the entire consciousness descending to the lower realm. However, compared to sending a consciousness doppelganger to the lower realm, the price was extremely high. It required the lives of at least dozens of Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals and the cultivation of at least 10,000 Tribulation True Immortals. He paid such a terrible price in exchange for the consciousness of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal with complete memories to enter the immortal body of the mortal world from the immortal world. A Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal who occupied the immortal body of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was absolutely invincible in the mortal world. Because he had already experienced the Golden Immortal Tribulation, the heavenly tribulation in the mortal world could not affect him at all. He could stay in the mortal world freely. Even if the Taishaman had been exterminated, with such a powerful guy, it was not impossible to reorganize the Taishaman in the mortal world. Under normal circumstances, of course, there was no need to use such a means. The Taishaman was the biggest sect in the Tao sect. They could control the situation without using any means. There was no need to sacrifice so many Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals and 10,000 Tribulation True Immortals. Now that the Taishaman had been exterminated, if they wanted to rebuild the sect, they must have such a peerless master who could hold the situation and establish absolute authority. Yang Chen's heart palpitated because the mysterious heaven sect had begun to activate. The consciousness of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was about to enter the immortal body bit by bit. The seed of consciousness left by Yang Chen was naturally the enemy of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. If the other party wanted to completely occupy the immortal body, there was only one way, and that was to destroy the seed of consciousness that currently occupied the immortal body. No matter what method was used, the seed of consciousness of Yang Chen must be forced out of the body, killed, or completely swallowed. The sense of danger even passed directly from the mortal world to the spiritual world. The seed of consciousness left by Yang Chen began to be quickly stimulated in the face of such a powerful enemy. Before the other party's consciousness could fully descend, it spontaneously began to fight back. Yang Chen, who was in the spiritual world, could not use other methods to help his seed of consciousness. He could only cultivate the 3 purities secret art crazily to strengthen the connection between him and the seed of consciousness to resist the swallowing of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. Yang Chen didn't even know if he could escape this disaster. Although it was only the seed of consciousness that was swallowed, Yang Chen himself might not be in too much danger, but it was definitely a disaster for Yang Chen's 3 purities secret art cultivation. It was likely that the 3 purities secret art would no longer be able to advance, and it would stay at this stage. The only fortunate thing was that even the consciousness of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal could not completely enter the immortal body at once, and it always took a long process. This process depended on the price that Profound Heaven Sect was willing to pay for it, and it lasted between 10 to 100 years. In particular, this was still possible without any interference at all. Now, Yang Chen's seed of consciousness had already occupied the immortal body, and it had become the biggest obstacle for the other party to enter the immortal body. As soon as the consciousness of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal entered the immortal body, it was met with the crazy resistance of Yang Chen's seed of consciousness. The two sides used the unconscious immortal body as a battlefield and began to fight wildly. There was no possibility of peace on both sides, only a battle of life and death. It was a battle of pure consciousness, and no one could see any clues from the outside. Both sides had a reason to fight to the death, and there was no room for change. Although it was only a collision of consciousness, the intensity was no less than a fierce fight. At this time, although Yang Chen was just sitting cross-legged and cultivating, the women next to him were extremely nervous. Yang Chen sat cross-legged on the ground. At first, he looked very calm, but as time passed, everyone found that something was wrong. The sweat flowing down Yang Chen's head and face like a stream clearly showed how dangerous Yang Chen was now. The nervous hearts of the women became more and more nervous as Yang Chen sweated. Even if they had seen the most dangerous situation with Yang Chen, they had never seen Yang Chen's performance like this. However, at this moment, they could only watch and couldn't help at all. They didn't even dare to make a sound for fear of disturbing Yang Chen. Chapter 1570. Yang Chen still underestimated the power of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. Although Yang Chen also had a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal realm in his memory, that realm was promoted with the help of others. In terms of state of mind, he was at best a quasi-Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal and had not reached the level of a real Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. At the same time, he also underestimated the power of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal after his consciousness descended. This wasn't a consciousness clone, but a transfer of the main body's consciousness from the main body in the immortal world to an immortal body in the mortal world. Even if it was not his own body, it was still the immortal body of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal who had experienced the Golden Immortal Tribulation. As long as his consciousness and body were slightly integrated, he could exert terrifying strength. It was estimated that it would take 8 to 10 years for the consciousness of the great principal Golden Immortal to descend, but in just a few days, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness seed could not expel the opponent at all. Instead, more of his body was occupied by the enemy. Now, Yang Chen's divine sense seed was slowly wrapped up by the consciousness of an unknown great principal Golden Immortal in the mysterious Heaven sect. Before, they were evenly matched, but as time passed, the consciousness of the great principal Golden Immortal slowly entered the Immortal's body. He completely lost his advantage and could only barely resist. Fortunately, after all, it was the spiritual awareness seed released by the powerful 3 Purities secret art. Even if the attack power could not be maintained, self-protection was relatively safe. For a while, the incomplete consciousness of the great firmament Golden Immortal could not cause any harm to the seed of consciousness. The enemy apparently also discovered this problem, so he just wrapped the spiritual knowledge seed with more and more consciousness, slowly accumulating strength, waiting for the moment when he could further destroy the spiritual knowledge seed. To Yang Chen, this was simply a disaster. His own spiritual awareness seed was wrapped. Even if it would not endanger his life for the time being, the 3 Purities secret art was almost abolished. Moreover, no one knew what kind of effect it would have on the body after the seed of consciousness was devoured or destroyed. This was something that even Taishang Laojun himself might not necessarily know. Yang Chen did not dare to take risks and let the enemy swallow his spiritual consciousness seed without resistance. That was not the character of Yang Chen in this life. Even if they were to die, they would at least leave a layer of skin behind. At this moment, Yang Chen was still working hard for his spiritual sense seed. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. During this year, Yang Chen tried his best, but in the end, he only managed to keep his spiritual sense seed alive. However, the longer it took, the more enemies' consciousnesses descended, and the stronger they became. The seed of consciousness was now in danger, and only the last little flame was left, which had not been completely destroyed by the other party. It was not appropriate to say that it was destroyed. The other party seemed to be very interested in this seed of spiritual awareness that occupied the immortal body first and did not kill it once. This was the fundamental reason why Yang Chun could survive. Yang Chun understood this, and so did the other party. Of course, there was another reason. That was, the other party was still not sure whether Yang Chen's spiritual sense seed had already sacrificially refined this immortal body. If they forced Yang Chun too hard, once Yang Chun made up his mind to detonate the immortal body, the gains would not make up for the losses. Shintian sect arrangement for hundreds of years had consumed a lot of manpower and material resources. Dozens of almighty immortals had paid the price of their lives, and even 10 tribulation true immortals had completely sacrificed their cultivation and became a waste. All this was to rebuild the mortal world's Taishaman and leave a complete foundation for the sect. In any case, they could not lose the big picture because of a small gain. Yang Chun did not know the other party's concerns, and was still struggling to not let the last little flame of the spiritual sense seed go out. Yang Chen's reason told him that it was almost his limit to hold on until now. The strength of the other party was getting stronger and stronger, and it was inevitable that he would eventually lose this spiritual sense seed. This was a difficulty that Yang Chun had never thought of, even though he claimed to be meticulous in his calculations. If he had known this earlier, he would have directly occupied the immortal body, and he might have been able to destroy Shintian's sect in the spiritual world by himself. However, at this point, it was no longer up to Yang Chun to regret it. A year's time was enough for 1/10 of the almighty immortal's complete consciousness to enter the immortal body. 1/10 of the almighty immortal was enough to kill all the cultivators in the mortal world. At this point, the spiritual sense seed left by Yang Chun in the immortal body could be said to have no control over its life or death, and it only depended on the mood of the other party. Yang Chen's persistence had also reached the point of exhaustion. At this last moment, under the absolute strength of the other party, the spiritual sense seed was no longer able to resist and was swallowed whole. In any case, Yang Chun had done his best. It was enough for Yang Chun to be able to hold on for a whole year in the hands of 1/10 of the almighty immortal. When the spiritual sense seed was swallowed, Yang Chen's heart suddenly became clear. Even if he lost the spiritual sense seed and the 3 purities secret art could not continue to cultivate, at this moment his spiritual sense cultivation was far beyond that of ordinary people. The cultivation method of spiritual awareness was not only the 3 purities secret art in the whole world. Except for Yang Chun, didn't everyone also cultivate it well? It was a big deal to change to a slightly more ordinary spiritual awareness cultivation method in the future. Losing this knot in his heart, Yang Chun was no longer so reluctant, and the sweat on his head and face was not as fierce as before and began to calm down slowly. At this moment, the mood suddenly made Yang Chun have a kind of understanding that if he did not break, he would not stand. There was nothing irreplaceable in this cultivation. Even the 3 purities secret art was like this. In the future, there would be nothing that could bother Yang Chun. It was at this moment that the 3 purities secret art that was being cultivated suddenly had a slight change. If the 3 purities secret art that Yang Chun cultivated in the past was just a step-by-step process of worrying about gains and losses, now the 3 purities secret art had a kind of initiative and determination to overcome all obstacles without hesitation. Don't look at Yang Chen's 3 purities secret art that had been cultivated to the 4th layer, but there had never been such a change. Along with it, because of the changes in the 3 purities secret art, Yang Chen's sea of consciousness had also undergone a trace of elusive changes. The originally condensed and very solid sea of consciousness at this moment seemed to have all turned into countless tough spiritual awareness threads in an instant. Everything in the sea of consciousness seemed to have become a condensed strand of spiritual awareness threads. The sudden change made Yang Chun not know what was going on. The 3 purities secret art was dictated by the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. At most, Yang Chun recited it from beginning to end and firmly recorded it in his mind. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord never talked about the changes, so Yang Chun naturally had no way of knowing. At this time, it was as if Yang Chen's sea of consciousness suddenly became a large cocoon full of spiritual awareness threads. Chapter 1571. That's right, it was a cocoon. Everything seemed to have become a condensation of spiritual awareness threads. If outsiders could see it, they would feel that Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was a cocoon formed by a huge silk thread. Yang Chun didn't know whether this change was good or bad, but since it could make a sound change, and it was a change after his own state of mind had a breakthrough, it should not be in a bad direction. At this time, Yang Chun could even give up the spiritual awareness seed left by the 3 Purities secret art, which also meant that he could give up the 3 Purities secret art. The feeling of gain and loss in his heart would no longer bother Yang Chun. Before Yang Chun had time to carefully appreciate the changes in the 3 Purities secret art and spiritual awareness, a subtle fluctuation was suddenly passed to Yang Chen's mind. This fluctuation was the fluctuation from the spiritual awareness seed left by Yang Chun in the mortal world. Could it be that the spiritual awareness seed had not been completely swallowed? Yang Chen's spirit was suddenly refreshed. Before, this faint connection was so subtle that even Yang Chun couldn't detect it. However, after the change in the 3 Purities secret art, the sea of consciousness was all turned into spiritual awareness threads, so that Yang Chun keenly grasped this connection. Suddenly, an incomparably vast divine sense broke into his sea of consciousness and exploded loudly in his sea of consciousness. Who are you? Are you related to the extermination of the Taishaman? Give me your life. A huge roaring sound reverberated in his sea of consciousness, and countless powerful thoughts rushed into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness and began to crazily collide in all directions. The majesty carried by that spiritual awareness was simply an unattainable mountain peak, with a high dignity that could not be blasphemed, rampaging in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, as if to dig out all the things in Yang Chen's mind. Not good. Yang Chun instantly understood what had happened. The spiritual knowledge seed left in the mortal world was not completely swallowed. The other party still left a negligible bit. But relying on his strong cultivation, he found a subtle connection between Yang Chun and the spiritual knowledge seed, and then traced this connection to Yang Chun. It was easy for a 1/10 of the great principal golden immortal to swallow the spiritual awareness seed of a mortal world that was at most at the peak of the Deshang stage. The spiritual consciousness seed left by Yang Chun became a tonic for the other party, strengthening the other party's spiritual consciousness. The most terrifying thing was that when he swallowed the spiritual consciousness seed, the great principal golden immortal discovered some of Yang Chen's memories. It must be known that the spiritual consciousness seed contained almost all the memories of Yang Chun before his ascension. Even if the other party could not get all the memories, it contained some of the memories about the Taishaman, which also let the other party understand a little bit. The first feeling of the great principal golden immortal master after getting these fragments of memories was that the owner of this spiritual consciousness seed was probably the culprit of the Taishaman's destruction. Even if not, it must have an inseparable relationship with the destruction of the Taishaman. In the first time, the great principal golden immortal did not care that he had just descended 1/10. A part of his consciousness immediately followed the connection between the spiritual consciousness seed and the main body and rushed into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. The reason why the immortal world wanted to descend, in addition to rebuilding the Taishaman, another important task of the great principal golden immortal in the lower realm was to thoroughly investigate the cause of the destruction of the Taishaman. If it was really the Taishaman who brought this upon themselves, it would be fine. But if there was another explanation, how could the Taishaman swallow this easily? The discovery of the memories in the spiritual consciousness seed made the great principal golden immortal feel like he had found a treasure. Although he could not get the complete fragments, as long as the owner of the spiritual consciousness seed was still alive and there was still a connection, he was not afraid that he could not find the truth. It was precisely for this reason that the great principal golden immortal left the last trace of the spiritual consciousness seed and did not completely swallow it. For the great principal golden immortal who had experienced the golden immortal tribulation and was already in the process of his consciousness descending, it took a huge price for his consciousness to go from the immortal world to the mortal world, but from the mortal world to the spiritual world, it was extremely easy. This was originally an irreversible passage up. With the cultivation of the great principal golden immortal, even if he only had 1/10 of his consciousness, he could easily find Yang Chun in the spiritual world, grab his spiritual consciousness, and enter Yang Chun's sea of consciousness. Yang Chun had completely given up on the spiritual consciousness seed, but he did not expect to have such a surprise. The other party's wisp of consciousness that rushed into his sea of consciousness, except for its great momentum, had almost no effect on Yang Chun. He had tens of thousands of years of memory in his previous life, and in this life he had killed more than tens of thousands of great principal golden immortals. The pressure of a mere great principal golden immortal was a joke for Yang Chun. Not to mention that Yang Chun had already integrated the entrance of the immortal beheading platform. Even if Yang Chun had not integrated it, this guy could not deter Yang Chun at all. As for the rampaging consciousness, it seemed very fierce and very lethal. But Yang Chun's sea of consciousness was full of tenacious spiritual consciousness threads at this time. No matter how hard the other party collided, it was like a high-speed bullet hitting the Kevlar bulletproof material fiber. As long as the fiber was tough enough, the bullet would be useless. At present, Yang Chun's spiritual consciousness threads were so hard. The spiritual consciousness threads, cultivated by the three purities secret art, had experienced the drastic changes of the previous great breakthrough and great enlightenment. The already tenacious spiritual consciousness threads had doubled. Part of the consciousness of the great principal golden immortal that was rushing around was directly entangled by countless spiritual consciousness threads and could no longer break free and escape. The drastic changes in the sea of consciousness brought about by the upheaval of the three purities secret art. At this time, Yang Chun really discovered a little clue. That was the originally hard sea of consciousness could actually be deformed at any time. Countless spiritual consciousness threads would normally be arranged in an orderly manner to form the original appearance of the sea of consciousness. Once there was this kind of collision, it would immediately change its shape without hesitation. The result of the direct collision was at most a certain part of the sea of consciousness that seemed to have been hit into a mess, but at least the part of the collision would be entangled a lot. For the part of the consciousness of the great principal golden immortal, it was like a punch with all his strength hitting cotton, which could make him vomit blood. It was in vain. At this moment, the part of the consciousness of the great principal golden immortal, not to mention continuing to dig deep memories from Yang Chun's sea of consciousness. After a few collisions, even the action of the consciousness seemed to have a problem. It was bound under the entanglement of thousands of strands of spiritual consciousness threads, and there was no place to escape. If that was the case, it was nothing. At most, the great principal golden immortal would send more and stronger consciousness, and then break free from Yang Chun's spiritual consciousness threads and retreat. The problem was that in Yang Chun's sea of consciousness, there was also a long blood-colored river and a white dragon formed by Dragon Shi and two fire dragons formed by Yin Yang Heaven-burning fire. Chapter 1572. Among these, the first thing that the consciousness of the great overarching golden immortal collided with was the white dragon condensed from Dragon Shi. Dragon Shi? So there is still a dragon behind it? Good, good. The voice of the great overarching golden immortal floated in Yang Chun's sea of consciousness. For the great overarching golden immortal, a mere Dragon Shi could not deter him at all. Not to mention a little Dragon Shi left in the mortal world. Even if a real dragon came from the immortal world, he would not be afraid. Would the direct disciple of the Shintian sect be scared to the point of not being able to move in the face of an old dragon? On the contrary, he was very excited to find out that there might be a dragon involved. What was the purpose of his consciousness descending to the mortal world? In addition to rebuilding the sect, wasn't it to find the culprit? The more people behind the scenes were found, the happier he would be. At this time, the great overarching golden immortal did not realize what it meant for his consciousness to be surrounded by Yang Chen's spiritual sense threads. Even according to the upper limit of Yang Chen's spiritual sense cultivation, what could a junior of the Earth immortal level do to him? A great overarching golden immortal. The gap between the realms was like a natural mode, and it was not something that could be made up for with any magic treasure or strange sea of consciousness. This was indeed the case. Under normal circumstances, if the great overarching golden immortal wanted to take the life of an Earth immortal, as long as he thought about it, the sea of consciousness of the Earth immortal could be blown up. Even if he did not die, he would only be left with a body without any soul. However, there were exceptions to everything. Even the consciousness of the great overarching golden immortal could descend from the immortal world to the mortal world. Such a ridiculous thing could happen. The exception was where Yang Chen was. The rampaging spiritual sense of the great overarching golden immortal would not think about what it would hit next. Boom! A sea of blood, or to be precise, countless blood-red spiritual sense threads condensed into a long river of blood. Every wisp of divine awareness carried a kind of fierce killing intent that could cross the sea of blood. In the collision of the two divine awareness, it directly invaded the divine awareness of the almighty immortal without reservation. The great principal golden immortal, who thought that he was in control of everything, was suddenly wrapped in this crazy, killing intent. Even if it was only in the state of spiritual awareness, he could not help but shiver. In an instant, that ball of divine sense no longer dashed around arrogantly. It obediently stayed where it was, not moving at all. After all, the opponent was a perfected golden immortal. Even if the blood-red river carried a soaring, killing intent, it could only frighten the perfected golden immortal for a while. It could not destroy the opponent's consciousness at all. However, this short moment was enough. At this moment, the black and white fire dragons entangled the divine sense of the great principal golden immortal. The two fire dragons cooperated with each other with an unusual tacit understanding. The two twisted into one and wrapped the opponent's divine sense tightly, leaving no gap. At this time, even if a perfected golden immortal had great ability, it was impossible to get rid of the entanglement of the two fire dragons. The moment after the Yin fire dragon was entangled, it was all transformed into the 7th grade spirit devouring dragonfire. Of course, after the improvement of the white fire seed, the 7th grade spirit devouring dragonfire actually had the power of the 8th grade spirit devouring dragonfire. Against the spiritual awareness, the spirit devouring dragonfire was the most powerful. The merciless burning made the perfected golden immortal immediately feel the pain. As long as it was not a fire cultivator and not a cultivator who had been exposed to the spirit-devouring dragonfire before, no matter how high the cultivation base was, it would not be able to completely get rid of the burning of the spirit-devouring dragonfire in a short time. It must be known that this was a fire seed that directly targeted the spiritual awareness. Once stained, unless one had an absolutely powerful cultivation base, there was no way to get rid of it. From a mortal world, along the connection between Yang Chen and the seed of spiritual awareness, it rushed into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness at most. The consciousness in his immortal body was only 1/10. In this way, this part of consciousness was less than 1% of the original consciousness of the perfected golden immortal. It was simply a fool's dream to fight against the spirit-devouring dragonfire with this incomplete spiritual awareness. Boom! The entire group of spiritual awareness was ignited, burning, and consuming crazily. The perfected golden immortal finally could not bear such pain, and the screams began to drift wildly in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. Accompanied by the screams, the consciousness of the perfected golden immortal had been filled with anger. The consciousness of the perfected golden immortal had descended to the mortal world, but it was insulted by a junior who didn't know how many years ago. It was intolerable. This was simply a great shame and humiliation. For a while, the perfected golden immortal even felt scared and was stunned. He was a great perfected golden immortal, a little bug that could be killed at any time and anywhere had brought such an insult to him. If he didn't tear Yang Chen's body into pieces, how could he dispel the hatred in his heart? At this moment, the perfected golden immortal could no longer care about anything else. The consciousness left in the immortal body rushed frantically along the previous connection. This time, not only did he want to dig out Yang Chen's memory completely, but he also would not let Yang Chen die a good death. A large group of consciousness rushed over, and the consciousness of the perfected golden immortal entangled by the yin-yang fire dragon immediately expanded rapidly, and the yin-yang fire dragon felt the pressure. Originally, there was no gap in the entanglement, but now there began to slowly appear a trace of a gap. The more pressure he faced, the more vigorous Yang Chen's fighting spirit became at the moment. In addition to the spirit-devouring dragon fire, countless other original 7th-grade fire seeds also began to take turns, burning the enemy's consciousness regardless of anything. The opponent was not a fire cultivator. This was completely certain. This alone had put Yang Chen in an invincible position. "Break for me!" The voice of the perfected golden immortal once again exploded in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. With this angry shout, the consciousness of the perfected golden immortal suddenly expanded at least 5 times. The yin-yang fire dragon, which was tightly sealed in the consciousness group, could no longer maintain its original state and was abruptly pushed open by this soaring consciousness. If it weren't for the tenacity of the spiritual awareness threads cultivated by the 3 Purities secret art, there would have been countless spiritual awareness threads broken. "Junior, this time you are dead. Not only you, but your family, your sect, and everyone related to you, all of them are dead meat." The perfected golden immortal was not calm in his rage. The kind of undisguised killing intent transmitted directly through his consciousness made Yang Chen feel it clearly. "Take care of yourself first." Yang Chen's voice was even calmer than that of the perfected golden immortal, and there was no fear of facing death. The consciousness of the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was obviously a little confused. Then, he suddenly discovered that his consciousness was being led by the 2 fire dragons into a huge white ball.